Hello, everybody. Welcome to the regular business meeting for Tuesday, May 6th. Holland Squallen, Klis Tuktumut, plus Squamish Okmeo. As always, we're gathered to do our work today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. And just before we move further into the agenda, I just want to take a moment to pause and reflect that yesterday, May 5th, was Red Dress Day, which takes place annually on May 5th and is the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit People. So my condolences to everyone affected by the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls tragedy that's unfolded in our country, and I think we have a long way to go for our truth and reconciliation. And I find that May 5th is particularly profound on the truth-telling portion of that. So I hold my hands up to the people doing that challenging work. Moving on with our agenda, I'd just like to advise everyone that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting. Could I have someone move adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries. And I just want to point out we've got Councillor Stoner. We've got an empty seat in the Horseshoe, but it's Councillor Stoner is joining us remotely today. So thank you for joining us, Councillor Stoner. And first up, we have a proclamation request from our own staff, Public Works Week. So I will turn it over to them to make the request.
There we go. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Devin Kiyonaga, Director of Public Works. With me, I have Ben Kinoshenko, Manager of Utilities, and our Manager of Operations, Jody Barron, sends his regrets. He wanted to be here, but couldn't make it tonight, unfortunately. We are here today to request Council to proclaim May 18th to May 24th as Public Works Week, National Public Works Week in the District of Squamish. I'm going to hand it over to Ben, who has a lot of experience running National Public Works Week events at the district here, and then after we're happy to answer any questions.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. So as Devin mentioned, May 18th to 24th, 2025 is Public Works Week. It is put on by the American Public Works Association and the Public Works Association of BC. It's a North American wide event, and this year is the 65th annual event, so a bit of a milestone. This year's theme is people, purpose, and presence. The District of Squamish has celebrated annually for the most part since 2009. So we're coming up on our 16th year of Public Works Week celebrations. The district's Public Works Department provides water, wastewater, roads, drainage, parks, sports fields, active transportation, electrical and street lighting, and fleet services to the district. Collectively, we are the custodians of municipal infrastructure. We're on call 24/7, 365 days a year to respond to major and minor emergencies. Public Works Week is the opportunity for staff to showcase the services we provide to the community and to educate on the importance of those services. Past events have included public open houses, Public Works Days for grade 4 students, equipment parades, and infrastructure tours for staff and council. And a former director of ours used to joke that if nothing else, we would at least get the Public Works yard cleaned up. This year, obviously, that's not much of a possibility with all the construction we have going on, but we'll look forward to that in future years. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Are there any questions?
Council, any questions? Or we have a recommendation, a proclamation requested. Go ahead, councillors.
In prior years or prior year, maybe council received T-shirts, and I think we did a photo and stuff. We wore them on the sort of the council day. Is there plans to do something like that this time? I did see an invite for the 22nd, I think.
Thank you for the question through the mayor. So we are not doing the T-shirts this year, unfortunately. It's something I really hope we can bring back in future years. We've had to dial it back because of all the construction. We're not bringing the school kids in, sadly. But it is something we want to bring back at a future time. But there will be opportunity for council and for staff to attend some tours. one of them being the Public Works facility. So you will, that's that invite that you saw, as well as some other opportunities for connection as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? I will move that May 19th to 23rd of 2025 be proclaimed as Public Works Week in the District of Squamish, seconded by Councillor French. I think it's an incredible opportunity to stop and reflect on the hard work that our staff does year round, in so many ways that really make the community work. So I'm really excited for this Public Works Week. I always enjoy the festivities and the tours that go with. So thank you for bringing this forward and for the work that you and your teams do all year. I'll do my best to make it to as many of the functions involved in that week as I can. Any other comments around the table on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously, as it should. Thank you so much, and we'll see you shortly for Public Works Week. All right, thank you. And thank you for being extra safe in council chambers. I know that coming to present to council is a unique risk. Thank you. So next up, we're on to item 5. So this is public hearing. So public hearing for Oceanfront Waterfront employment. Oh, sorry, I skipped that part. Thank you. While we're getting set up for that, sorry, I missed item 4 is unscheduled public attendance. So if anyone wishes to address council with a matter that's urgent or emergent since the agenda was published and needs to be addressed before the next council meeting, this would be your opportunity to do so. Seeing none, we'll move on to the public hearing. Thank you for the catch. I missed.
Awesome. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher. I'm the Manager of Current Planning with the District of Squamish, and I'm here this evening to present background and information on the 3 bylaws subject to this evening's public hearing for the Oceanfront Marine Employment File. On the screen are the 3 bylaws under consideration this evening. They amended the official community plan, phase development agreement, and zoning bylaw. All 3 of these bylaws require a public hearing. This application was first reviewed by council at the November 26th Committee of the Whole meeting. Several changes were made based on committee feedback, and the revised proposal was presented to council on April 1st, 2025 for consideration of first and second reading. The application as presented today has no changes since second reading was received. At second reading, council had some comments regarding the viability of a no gas covenant for all uses. Staff worked through this concept with a developer who researched light industrial uses and the viability of all electric systems. Primarily, it appears that moving to all electric would require units that are designed to operate more efficiently, reducing the use of bay doors and thus significantly reducing the number of possible light industrial uses on site. Many light industrial uses still require equipment that only operate with the use of natural gas. The location of the proposal is on the Squamish Oceanfront Peninsula. The peninsula is covered by the sub-area plan and appendix to the official community plan, the top left of your slide. You'll note on the image to the top right the extent of the Squamish Oceanfront that is zoned in alignment with the sub-area plan. And the subject proposal is located in Block C and partially in Block I, as shown on the lower middle image highlighted in bright blue. This slide highlights the subject project in the greater context of approvals on the Oceanfront Peninsula. This image shows all of the approved DPs, some of which have been constructed, others which still await issuance. The waterfront employment block, known in the zone as Block C and within the sub-area plan as waterfront employment, is located on the northwest portion of the peninsula along the Catamount Slough, located north of Spockos Feather Park, south of Carbon Engineering, and to the west of both Residential 1 and Office 1. The application is designated oceanfront within the official community plan, with the majority of the project site designated waterfront employment. The southernmost part of the site is designated civic use. The site is split zoned Area C and Area I in the CD69 zone. Development permit areas 1, 2, 11, and 13 apply to the site. The applicant proposes to amend the sub-area plan in CD 69 zone to permit a mixed-use district, which would include 207 rental units, 20% of which would be 3-bedroom units, all of which would be secured as rental tenure in the zone and with a housing agreement, and located above light industrial uses. 20% of these would be adaptable. We're proposing a layout of 5 buildings with above ground and below grade parking. Excuse me. The applicant is proposing to amend the employment uses from marine employment and marine accessory uses to light industrial uses generally. For Block I, which is Building F on the slide, the applicant proposes a childcare use and a public art use, which would include securing 390 square meters as childcare space and dedicating 98 square meters to Squamish Arts at a $1 lease rate plus triple net for a minimum term of 25 years. The Oceanfront's parking standards are currently the same as those that apply outside of the downtown. The applicant is proposing to lower their parking ratio given their location and rental tenure. This ratio would still be higher than the downtown rate of 1 stall per unit, but slightly lower than the community-wide ratio. The ratio for employment uses would remain the same. The applicant intends to utilize the shared parking provision in the zoning bylaw. They would also provide a shared parking strategy prior to DP issuance. The required parking means that a minimum of 11 surface stalls will be required, accommodating overheight vehicles. Bicycle parking exceeds the bylaw and will be secured. This application does not trigger the community amenity contribution policy, as the only residential use proposed is rental. Given that an OCP amendment is triggered, the applicant is proposing to construct 390 square meters of childcare space, lease 90 square meters to Squamish Arts for a period of 25 years at a rate of $1 a month plus triple net. Both would need to be delivered prior to the completion of the 120th residential unit, and then of course the 207 units of rental housing. Several clauses are being added to the phase development agreement. The phase development agreement bylaw seeks to stipulate that only renewable energy can be used for all residential units, that Lot O is secured as residential rental tenure with the number of 3 and 2 bedrooms and adaptable units secured. The applicant has also agreed to add a clause that would ensure all future leaseholders are aware of potential conflict with industrial users. The PDA secures the art space and childcare space, securing its delivery of these amenities to the 120th residential unit. The applicant has committed to a statutory right-of-way through the subject site for public access as per the sub-area plan, provision of a parking management plan prior to DP issuance, and 2 educational signage along the Catamount Slough on this site specifically. Finally, the phase development agreement bylaw updates its own zoning bylaw. Some changes are also proposed to the sub-area plan. Primarily, the waterfront employment area is being revised to reflect the change in use, while language is proposed to allow any rezoning considering rental or affordable housing only to bypass a sub-area plan amendment if it is determined that there is adequate infrastructure on site. Finally, the sub-area plan is being updated to recognize the official names of Squamish Feather Park and the Chemish Trail. The application is not in alignment with the OCP, so a public hearing is required. A public hearing is also required for the amendment to the official community plan and the phase development agreement as per legislation. Statutory and legislative processes for notification have been followed. Notices were distributed to properties within 100 meters of the oceanfront sub-area plan area, and 2 ads were placed in the Squamish Chief on May 1st and April 24th. No comments have been received. Following the public hearing, council may consider the staff recommendation for 3rd reading of all 3 bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions for staff before I go into, I have a bit of a script to go over to open the public hearing, but make sure we're set up well. Go ahead, Councillor French.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Herford. Some of the drawings included in the package make reference to climbing daycare and climbing gym. So just checking in to ensure that my memory is correct about the climbing gym concept. So is it correct that in the early planning, a purpose-built climbing gym was proposed for the space, and that was eventually cut and replaced by the daycare space? So is that just a legacy error in those drawings?
Thank you for that question. Through the mayor, yes, that would be an error in the drawings. The zoning does not allow for a climbing gym at this location or any indoor recreation facility.
Okay. That's good for now.
Okay, other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Testing. Ms. Fletcher, you mentioned in your presentation, I'll quote from one of your slides, notice on lease of potential industrial noise disturbance. I think I recorded it accurately. We have a covenant that is affixed to the phase development agreement. And there are two covenants for the peninsula, one prospectively on the east and west sides, and they are somewhat different in nature. Could you relate that notice on lease, quote unquote, to those covenants? Is this an additional initiative, or are you referring to, in fact, those industrial covenants that exist on both sides of the peninsula?
Thank you for that question. Through the mayor, this is an additional initiative. You could characterize it as that, where currently to see a charge on title, generally the owner would be aware of it, or you could put the title to see it. In this case, we're ensuring that every lease agreement for future renters would include a clause to notify them of the industrial activity similar to the covenant, but it would need to be within the lease agreement so that future residents are also aware, even though they may not know to check the title or charges as they're not owners.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council, before I open the public hearing portion? Okay, I have a bit of a script to read here, so bear with me as I go through this. So this public hearing is being held pursuant to the Local Government Act and requirements to allow the public to present and to provide submissions to Council respecting the Waterfront Employment RZ 0000046, which is OCP 09. So District of Squamish Official Community Plan, District of Squamish Phase Development Agreement Bylaw, and the District of Squamish Zoning Bylaw. Everyone present will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard. We want to ensure that no one is discouraged or prevented from making their views known, whether speaking in favor or against the proposed amendments. Therefore, I ask that members of the public maintain order and quiet during the meeting. Please do not applaud or interrupt any speech or action of members of council or any other person addressing council. Please ensure that your remarks are relevant to the matters contained in the proposed bylaw. This is not an opportunity for members of the public to have their questions answered by staff or by council. Any questions or points of clarification can be directed to staff by contacting the planning department. Council is here to listen and will not debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with the public or each other during the hearing. Members of council may ask clarifying questions following submissions. Please note the public hearing is being recorded and web streamed live, and the recording will be posted on the district website. Media may be present, and the public can advise the media if they don't want their picture taken. Up to and as part of this hearing, the public has had the opportunity to make submissions to council. If any submissions were received, they are available for review and have been included as part of the electronic agenda available on the website. We've already had the planning department presentation, and we saved some time next on the agenda for Squamish Nation officials, which we do not have in the room today. So next I'll go to the proponent, and I'll ask that the proponent or the representative to comment, after which everyone else will be given an opportunity to speak. So over to you.
Okay. Very close. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Carlos Savarce. My address is 37749 Cleveland Avenue, and I'm here today on behalf of the proponent of the project, Oceanfront Squamish Developments Limited Partnership. I'd like to start by saying I appreciate all the time and effort to date by staff and council to advance the project to this point. We think this is a tremendous opportunity for the oceanfront lands and for our community to bring online additional rental housing, much needed daycare space, space for the Arts Council, and importantly, a viable and attractive light industrial space at the ground floor that will allow for a number of new and existing businesses to take root and grow at the oceanfront. With my time, I'm hoping to address some of the comments expressed by council at the previous first and second reading. And so the first is the wind. Yes, we know it is windy down on our site. And so with regards to the wind, I will point out within the master plan, we are fortunate in the alignment of the master plan, and it's probably best viewed by looking at the ortho photo of the site. And you can see that our two beaches are directly perpendicular to the predominant wind and wave direction, and our streets aren't exactly 45 degrees, but they're pretty close. That sets us up for success on the site. And then from there, we investigate our building design, our awning design at the ground plane, vegetation, and a number of ways that we can hope to mitigate the wind, understanding that it is typically windy during certain times of the day. One theme that arose from the previous meeting was the high-level questions around how do we properly plan for a future and for users that we don't actually know who are going to be in that space, and what specific tenants are going to be in that space and how it'll be used. And I'll just say I would love to know exactly who's going to be in that space when we're designing these buildings. And if I had my druthers, I could fill that building right now, but we don't really know who's going to be in there until it's done. And so not knowing exactly who's going to take that space produces a number of challenges. It produces a number of challenges at the initial development permit stage, produces a number of challenges at the building permit stage, and then we have this tenant improvement stage where we really find out how well we did or how much we screwed up by the amount of modifications that have to happen to this building in order to accommodate those future tenants. So ultimately, the zoning and the parking equations in the zoning, they provide us with a great place to start, but the details really come into play once we get to that building permit, tenant improvement, and then the business permitting that finally takes a look at the parking. It is frankly an unfortunate reality of the situation we find ourselves in, and we are constantly trying to get smarter and trying to do better to ensure that we can work with future tenants to have the opportunity to reduce the amount of work that has to be done to that building, reduce costs, and ultimately make a better product for rental. While we remain quite bullish on the long-term success of this project proposal, we do see some rougher roads as we navigate local and global forces acting on our market. And so in order to respond to these unknowns, we are looking to provide ultimate flexibility within this building form to be able to adapt to whoever those future users are. As the overall Oceanfront site evolves, I think we will find greater clarity around parking uses, shared uses between homeowners and businesses, and really start to understand how people are using the peninsula and really seeing the balance between the office space, the commercial, the tourist space, and the residents, and seeing where those parking spaces can serve more than one user. We also have underground parking proposed for almost the entirety of the site. And so we will have to habituate people in Squamish to park underground for when they're visiting the site or when they're using commercial spaces. That's going to be something that we're going to have to learn, and we're thinking about parking mechanisms to really facilitate that use and ensure it's being used properly. With regard to childcare, we think we are in a good spot with the size of our childcare, and we think there is a market there for it, and its location I think will be placed highly in demand with adjacencies to the Oceanfront Park. And then with regards to the no gas request for light industrial. So following the hearing, we spent some time speaking to a number of potential future users and folks in the commercial brokerage industry, as well as other developments that have gone down the path of no gas across all user types in the Lower Mainland. We took from that a number of lessons and best practices that we'll be looking to integrate into the development permit package. The commentary has allowed us to think about how we can better create optionality within the light industrial spaces. So if users don't need a roll-up door and the uses would prefer to have a more climate controlled building, we can start to look at supplying heat pump systems that are all electric. I think we need to be smart about how we can navigate that form and character piece. So almost having that optionality to do a storefront window or to do a roll-up door without onerous changes to the permit, but I think we can get there. I also learned about some interesting ceramic heaters that can be used that are powered by electricity, so that if you have a warehouse space with a lot of storage, but you have some small work areas, you can use ceramic heaters to heat small spaces, and that can still meet the efficiency requirement and the cost requirement that are used for some of these buildings. Where there are unknowns are when we have users that just demand gas, either for a commissary kitchen or coffee roasting or uses like that, or where their energy demands exceed what's planned for within the electrical system. So we move from pad mounted transformers into substations within buildings, and suddenly we're really changing the whole building design around that energy use. So all this to say, you know, we are committed to finding low carbon solutions on our site. And so we will be looking to provide heating and cooling through electric sources and for domestic hot water. It's just trying to not limit ourselves for the potential of some of those users we may give up if we have no gas to the building whatsoever. So all that to say, we really recognize the importance of the energy transition. We are really working on our site to meet a variety of sustainability goals. That includes the use of mass timber, which you've already seen on our site, prefabricated and offsite fabricated construction, our air tightness techniques, passive house inspired design, and a number of other approaches. Those are just to name a few. And so we appreciate retaining the option to provide gas, but we will look to reduce that as we look to reduce the overall greenhouse gas emissions on our site as a whole. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your submission. Next, I'll open it up to the public. So each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to address council. I'll first call on speakers participating in person, and please raise your hand and wait to be recognized and approach the podium. Details to participate by telephone or via the WebEx platform are available on the district website. There is a moderator who will communicate with people participating online. So I'll open up to the public, see if anyone would like to make a submission regarding this matter. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Come on up. So if you could start by giving us your name and your address or neighborhood, then you've got 3 minutes to address council.
Thank you, council. My name is Ross Tippman. I'm a resident of the Highlands. I live at 2588 Paisley Place. I'd just like to say my opposition to the changing. Essentially what we're talking about, as far as I can understand, is that we're changing from marine employment to mostly residential with light industrial. I think as we try and create a waterfront community, it's pretty important to accommodate the marine industrial or marine employment. If it's all residential, then it's not a community. There's a lot of viable marine businesses that are existing in town and within the Lower Mainland that are looking for waterfront space. Waterfront space is rare. If we give this away to additional residential, whether it be rental, it's valuable real estate that we won't have again. There's very little oceanfront in Squamish. We are just getting access to it, and to give it away to residential and eliminate the opportunity to have this marine employment and eliminate those businesses from the community that could potentially come, I think is a big loss. And so that's why I'm here today, to express my opinion, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your submission. Is there anyone else who wants to make a submission in council chambers here? Seeing none, I'm going to go to our moderator and see if anyone has their hand up electronically online.
Nobody online right now.
Okay. Council, any questions for our staff before I do another round of closing statement? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just trying to sort of wrap my head around the staff recommendation on the no gas. When I read and think about the discussion, our climate action plan, it identified that we're falling short of where we need to hit. The discussion was that it wasn't meant to be a prescriptive plan, that these are examples of the things we want to do, but it's not comprehensive. The province is short on clean BC. We heard like they're missing by half what their 2030 targets were. There are electric coffee makers or coffee roasters, electric kitchens. I mean, the gas lobby has been very powerful in the restaurant industry, but from what I understand, you adjust temperatures a little bit, but electric is actually quite fine from a sort of, can you get the job done? We have 2 fire halls in public works that use bay doors efficiently that we've built. And so when I sort of look at the policy we have and what's out there, and then what we ourselves have done, I guess I'm trying to have trouble reconciling that with the recommendation. And so I guess I'm sort of trying to understand the policy that would direct us to this recommendation. And what is the piece that I'm missing in that? Because when I look at our CCAP and some of the goals we have, it would actually seem to push us in this direction, I would think.
Through the mayor, Squamish is Senior Director of Community Development. As Ms. Fletcher laid out in the presentation, the addition of this requirement would likely mean that it's a challenging building for light industrial users. So what we would get is probably more commercial based tenants and not light industrial. We do have policies that support light industrial. I don't believe we have policies directing us to pursue no gas in light industrial setups. It's much easier to do that with commercial and residential tenants at this point in time. So based on that, staff are recommending not putting this restriction in at this point in time here, because it would simply mean that there will likely be no light industrial users here.
I'm going to go to Councillor Greenlaw. We'll come back around. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. I was just wondering if staff could speak to the concern that was raised by the member of the public about the loss of marine employment / business area, and if that could be accommodated in this existing light industrial zoning.
Thank you through the mayor. So staff did look at this. We are a bit limited on information on marine employment uses and viability and location. It's work that's forthcoming in the future. The site itself doesn't accommodate the marine employment to the extent that it was envisioned in the sub-area plan because of where it's sited and access to it. And there's no access to the water from it because of the bathymetry of the Catamount and I'm sorry, my brain is blanking here, but you can't access the water from the site with a boat launch based on several limiting factors. Light marine employment uses are not excluded from the light industrial use in the zoning. So if there were users that could utilize the site for marine employment uses, they could continue there.
I'm going to take the opportunity to follow up on that question, where the original plan had aspirations of having water access from this portion of the site. Is that correct?
Thank you through the mayor. That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So then the overall employment space, has that changed in this? Is it just an addition of the residential use, and the employment space is of similar size, or how is that changed in what's proposed here?
Thank you through the mayor. Yeah, so the amount of employment space available has not changed. The density of the employment has increased. In the previous report to council for first and second reading, there was an employment analysis done that showed the intensity of employment of a marine industrial use on the site versus a light industrial use. The light industrial use allows for more intensive employment on the site in a wider variety of jobs, whereas the marine employment requires lay down space that would preclude it from being as high of a density of employment. But the overall level of employment is the same, just with residential on top.
Thank you. And is there, sorry, I think you said earlier that there was work underway to understand where an appropriate site would be if not here for this type of use. Can you speak to that process, or when we should expect to see some output from that?
For 2026, we have a budget item, I believe, for marine sector impact analysis. So previously it was a broader scope item. We're recommending that for 2026, that project be narrowed down to essentially looking at the Oceanfront Peninsula and the remaining employment lands and what the impact of marine employment would be, and where is it best located.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Stoner next.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm just wondering if staff can, if we have any comparables for the childcare space. So in previous comments, at previous readings, there was some concern around the size of the space being functional. As I read it, there's 12 infant toddler spaces, 24 for kids aged 3 to 5, which I feel like is on par with the size of the Sea and Sky childcare development, but I'm just curious if we have any other comparables in terms of the size of the childcare space being provided.
Through the mayor, we haven't looked at comparables, although we did go back to our planner who specializes in childcare and confirm that the space is what would be expected to support an infant toddler program. The 25 3 to 5 spaces is what you would need to support proper ratios and make it economically viable.
Thank you.
On the childcare piece, there's I understand the parking overall, the shared use plan will come at development permit, although the tenants don't come till later, which we also heard. So that I think it's challenging whether it's at this point or wherever that lies. So I'm just going to contemplate that. But often when we look at childcare, the traffic flow for pickup and drop off is more front and center. Is that something where does that get looked at? Should we be giving that more consideration now, or is that at a future step in this process where things like circulation for pickup and drop off and so on need to come into play?
Thank you for the question. The circulation, typically we would look at more at development permit. We know that with childcare spaces in this development, it would require 8 stalls. The way that was managed within the development, we could secure at development permit when we did request the shared parking plan, so through signage, etc. It's also located near the parking off of Road D, it's called, adjacent to the park, so there'll be public parking available there. So staff are confident that parking issues will be mitigated naturally during pickup and drop off with the availability in the area. But it is something that we'll look at further at development permit.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions before I go back to just double check with the public? Is there anyone else that would like to make a submission for this matter? Okay, I'm going to go into a closing statement here. So if there's no further speakers, I'll ask, and council has no further questions to our planning department. So now that everyone has been given a reasonable opportunity to be heard, it is a requirement that I ask 3 times if there's anyone else who wishes to speak before we close the public hearing. So for the first time, is there anyone else that wants to speak or make a submission? And I'm looking to see if there's anyone online waving their hands. There's no one in the room. No. For a second time, is there anyone else that wants to speak or make a submission? For the third and final time, is there anyone else who wants to speak or make a submission? So I'll now declare the hearing closed. Thank you very much for your submissions. Just to note, please note that council members are not permitted to receive any further submissions or hear either a proponent or opponent to an application once the public hearing has been concluded. This means we can't speak to you out in the community or receive emails or phone calls on any of these bylaws until a decision on the bylaws has been made. Any and all communication from this point must be channeled to staff. Thank you. So, council, we've got, we'll move on to our consent agenda, and we'll be back to this shortly. We've got consent agenda between here and consideration of this. So, would anyone like to pull anything from the consent agenda? Seeing none, so move the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Pettingill. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And now we're back to the subject at hand, which is consideration of third reading for the bylaws that we just held the public hearing for. Yeah. We've had a presentation. We've asked questions. We have recommendation of before us to give third reading to the proposals. Do these need to be done individually just before we start this, or can these go as a block? Okay, so the recommendation, we can do all three of those together should we see fit. So I'll move that to get the conversation started if there's a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Anderson. I'd like to, I'm supportive of this direction. I thank you to the member of the public that spoke earlier. We had in the earlier conversations around the need for this change, that need and that lack of access to water was highlighted far more than what we're doing about it, which is what's before us today. So there was aspiration to have direct water access on that side from the early days of this project, and for a lengthy number of reasons, mostly to do with environmental considerations, that's not possible on the site. So I see that this is an opportunity to add some rental housing and some daycare, but also to protect the employment space that's there with slightly different considerations as far from a allowable use perspective. But I think this is a reasonable response to the reality of where we are as we advance through the lengthy process of realizing the development on this very important site for the community. So I think what we have before us is very responsive to the needs of the community today, and speaking in support of all three changes that we need to make. So happy to support. Other comments, Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Mayor Herford. I will also be speaking in support of the recommendations put forward by staff. I'll make some general comments. We have the proponent making some suggestions clearly regarding marine use, regarding industrial space, employment lands, and also regarding amenities. My general comment is it would be optimal if we had better roadmaps on our part for the developer to work with and be advised by. And we don't really, and we need to improve this. We don't have a roadmap for marine planning. We don't have a roadmap for industrial space that we need, and we don't have a roadmap for cultural and recreational amenities. And these needs are reflected in the dialogue around this project and the uncertainties. What we do have is a developer that's prepared to work with us, is keen to work with us to learn together. And the developer spokesperson has touched on this, learning together with respect to heating systems and also with respect to prefab offsite construction. I'd like to give some attention to this because I think that there's a number of development sites and areas in our town that could really benefit from watching what will happen and unfold in the oceanfront. Downtown construction projects, we need to do a better job of offsite construction, prefab methods, and avoiding the obstructions that occur with prolonged construction projects in the downtown area in particular. I'm happy to note staff's initiative regarding the additional notice on lease of potential industrial noise disturbance. We do not meet the standards of, for example, District of North Vancouver or City of North Vancouver with respect to interface guidelines. We don't. And we should also consider this an area of learning. We will have new development in future on the east side of the downtown Oceanfront Peninsula and areas that will be also adjacent to industry and future industry that we're not quite clear about what's going to evolve there. Maybe a sawmill. And so we need to look at that also as a learning opportunity, the noise interface and the covenants that we're required. We do not meet the needs, the standards of North Vancouver, and we should be aware of that. And that was a big debate in 2015. And so we should be mindful that we've been there, and maybe that's an ongoing conversation. I'd like to touch on, again, the marine aspects. I believe that in any citing of policy for this development should be citing the marine action strategy in the present report to council. That's not its purpose. We revisited that last time. But the marine action strategy is not something that we should lose sight of. It addresses the need to produce a roadmap for waterfront use. We're not there yet. We've announced in that strategy a plan to make a plan, but we haven't got that plan yet. We also have in that strategy, thanks to Ms. McJanet's work, a reference to the need to look at interpretation on our waterfront, of the history of our waterfront, the cultural aspects of our waterfront. And that is something that should not be lost sight of. That's another aspect of the marine action strategy. Finally, the mayor referred to aspirations, quote unquote, from regarding waterfront access in the original plan. They were more than aspirations. The community demanded attention to waterfront employment. And in fact, the original vision was 1/3 waterfront employment. Later, that got watered down to employment. Now, it's later got watered down even further, and now we're in a bit of a pickle. But that was more than an aspiration by the community in the years 2004 through 2011. It was a demand. And so we should keep that in mind and make sure that we address this in plans forthcoming. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, I will be supporting the motions on the floor. I agree that it is disappointing that the water access that the community had once demanded, as per my council colleagues' comments, can't be realized in this site. And I think that is a result of a disservice of many years ago, where we had ambitions to provide that water access, and here we are in trying to actually make it happen, and we simply can't with the level of the site and the bathymetry of the Cattermole Slough. It's actually near impossible to actually put a boat access or water ramp there. So having specific marine employment space is really limited when you can't actually get boats in and out of the water on that site. So maybe we set ourselves up incorrectly when we did the larger negotiations on this property. But I do think it's important that we remain responsive now that we know what is actually feasible on that site. And as the community's needs have evolved, I agree with Councillor Anderson that the needs for waterfront access and marine employment haven't gone away. And so there's more work to do in finding out where we can place that. And the options are limited, unfortunately, going forward. But this is not the site for it. And I think that what is presented here helps to solve some of the issues that we do have at hand. So a real dearth of rental units in our community. So 207 new units will go a long way, and 20% of those being 3-bedroom or family oriented. Right next to a sizable daycare space, which we know is also in high demand. So this particular project doesn't trigger our CAC policy, but it is addressing a lot of the things that we would typically seek in our community amenity contribution policy in terms of childcare and rental housing. We also appreciate the work that has gone on with Squamish Arts and trying to provide some public art amenity space out in that area. I think will be highly valued as well. I was mostly concerned in terms of the loss of employment space with the proposal, but what we saw at second reading that staff brought forward in terms of the employment density that is being delivered on the site as proposed, it more than doubles, or is expected to more than double the amount of employment on this site than what is currently envisioned under the existing marine industrial scheme. And so I think that gave me some comfort that we are not losing employment space in this space, but we are actually delivering more for our community with this proposal. So I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, thanks. Just start off by saying I have been very impressed by this proponent and what's gone on the site. I think just every time we go down to the park or have events there, you can see how incredible the work is. And I appreciate the proponent's comments. In general, I'm supportive of what's being done here. And I think given the constraints on marine access, the marine use change makes sense. However, I am still hung up on the gas piece. And when I look at, again, the OCP and the numbers we have to hit where the province is falling short, and the fact that we have figured out 2 fire halls and a public works with bay doors, how to make that work. I think it can be done. I think it has to be done. And I suspect my vote won't, I'm not going to win the vote, but I think this is an important point to start pushing on, and to hopefully result in changing our policy, if not tonight, to work on that shift. I think what I heard is that if we don't do this now, there's much more significant building transition costs to get in different transformers or stuff down the road. And so I would sort of prefer to deal with that now when it's a little more easily, something we can do more easily. For me, it's not just the gas in a per unit. And I take the proponent at their word that they are really going to look at who their tenants are and what they can do to reduce energy. And so that's fantastic. But I'm also looking to make sure we reduce the gas service lines in the road, because they're not needed, because none of the buildings have gas in them. So how do we start making these things happen? And I understand that this might be less appealing to those proponents wanting gas, but that's kind of the whole point. And it ensures more availability for the industrial users that have figured out different ways to be more green. And so I think we're at a point where we need to start prioritizing this. So, overall, there's a heck of a lot to like on this, but this is an issue that I think it's important to start pushing on. And so for that, I will probably not be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll be speaking in support of the rezoning of this staff recommendation. I am also, like my colleagues, disappointed that this site wasn't able to facilitate marine employment. I think that when we look at the cost of dredging and the cost of maintaining the depth of our marine environment to the level that we can actually service boat movement, that this simply putting a boat access is not the start of the story. It's not the end of the story. There's a lot more that goes into maintaining a marine employment space. I'm extremely happy to see the commitment to a nonprofit space, an Art Squamish space, and the childcare. For me, one of the key elements, though, of this proposal is the rental units that are going to be secured in this. I think it's extraordinarily important that our community has a balanced proportion of rental and ownership options, and I think we have a long way to go to build up the rental options in our community. So I'm really happy to see those here. So with that, I'll be supporting the rezoning. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. Speaking in support of the staff recommendation. As we've heard from my colleagues, marine employment lands are also a concern for me, although I am confident that marine employment spaces will be delivered as the planning for this area evolves. And we figure out and find out where it's feasible to get the kind of waterfront access that industry needs. And really what we're getting here is a development that has been a long time in coming to get to this point, to deliver daycare spaces along with an art space, some units for some light industry, and some much needed purpose-built rental housing.
Thank you. Councillor Greenlaw.
Thanks. Just through the chair, I'll echo some of the other comments that have been made. I am concerned about the lack of marine employment, which is, no pun intended, a ship that has already sailed. But I'll also echo some of Councillor Pettengill's comments about the gas, and there is something else he said that I wanted to echo, and now I can't remember. Anyways, yeah, thanks.
Okay. Seeing no other hands, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Pettingill opposes. Councillor Greenlaw opposes. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. So next we have next item is 7B1, District of Squamish Official Community Plan Bylaw number 2500/2017. This is the amendment bylaw relating to the interim housing needs report. And this is not bylaw number 3139/2025. Just trying to use the full title to give you time to get set up there, but hello, the floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Sarah McJanet, Manager of Community Planning, and with me, Matt Gunn, Senior Planner. We are presenting Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 3139 for first reading tonight, prior to initiation of external formal referrals and engagement. And this is in advance of Council's consideration of further readings and adoption scheduled before the end of 2025. So Bylaw 3139 is a legislatively required implementation action to address new provincial requirements to align the OCP with housing needs identified in our Squamish Interim Housing Needs Report, the 2024 update from December that Council endorsed. So for this amendment, we do have a limited scope and we have limited the scope to the mandated Housing Needs Report policy amendments. And this scope was endorsed by Council in September of 2024 at the Committee of the Whole meeting. And as a reminder, this is in advance of and not connected to our more major OCP update that is scheduled for 2028. For background on these mandated amendments to the OCP, the Local Government Act now requires municipalities to prepare a housing needs report every 5 years and to address housing need within our OCP. Bill 44 established a standardized methodology for these reports, so communities have consistent comparable assessments, and the reports are required to identify the 5 to 20-year housing needs. We were required to complete and publish our interim report by January 1st. This was completed. And next, the province requires our OCP and zoning bylaw updates where required to address the housing needs. And we need to, as part of this, demonstrate that there is sufficient land pre-zoned for development to accommodate development for the number of units identified by the housing needs report. And Matt will speak to this a little bit shortly. The timeline shown here highlights our work to date on this interim housing needs report update. As you can see on the left-hand side, we completed it and published it at year-end 2024. And over the last 3 months, we have reviewed existing policy and drafted proposed amendments as required by the legislation. And we've also hosted some pre-consultations with respecting engagement process with Squamish Nation and also with the Squamish Housing Society. And subject to first reading of the bylaw, we will then formally refer the bylaw to Squamish Nation, government agencies, including the SLRD, the Board of Trustees with School District 48 and Vancouver Coastal Health. And we are proposing to undertake some focused housing sector and public engagement prior to bringing the bylaw back for further readings in the fall. Quickly highlighting that this is a focused OCP minor amendment aligning housing policy with our local housing needs. And this is supportive of our OCP objective to increase the supply, availability, and access to affordable housing units across the local housing spectrum and continuum. As a reminder, the required content in the Local Government Act, or the required content in OCPs, is set out in the Local Government Act. So we are required to indicate the location, amount, type, and density of residential development to meet our anticipated housing needs for a period of at least 20 years, as well as including housing policies respecting affordable housing, rental housing, and special needs housing. And then, of course, the consideration of the most recent housing needs report. The next slide, so I'll just touch on quickly the proposed amendments to OCP Section 12, which is our diverse and affordable housing section. So firstly, we updated the introduction section with current housing context and a snapshot that reflects more updated census data from 2021, as well as reference to our affordable housing strategy and action plan. And we incorporated additional insights from our most recent housing needs reports. We created a new subsection titled projected housing needs, with objective 12.1 and policies 12.2 A to E, specifying housing needs reporting with directives to undertake the housing needs report every 5 years and update our OCP and include map statements and map designations for at least the 20-year total number of housing units required to meet need. So next, Matt is going to walk you through the housing need calculation and associated policies to address them.
Thank you, Sarah. So the OCP amendment adds policy related to housing needs aligned with the new methodology from the 2024 Housing Needs Report. We've discussed in the past, there was a provincial tool that automatically generates the prescribed housing needs for Squamish across a bunch of different categories, including extreme core housing, homelessness, suppressed household formation, anticipated growth, rental vacancy, and additional local demand. And according to that tool, starting in 2021, 6,300 units were needed by 2041. So that's the target that we have to show we can meet in our zoning in the OCP. So our amendment includes policy that outlines the location of how these housing units will be accommodated in the community. And just before I launch into that, I just want to give you like a real brief overview. We've got lots of development that's happening in Squamish. We've chosen just one little simple part of the possible zoning or the zoning that exists in Squamish that could potentially provide that, and that is the provincially mandated Bill 44 SMA housing, small scale multi-unit housing. And that's all we had to look at to say we can meet what this calculator told us we needed to do. So there's lots of stuff we could look at. We didn't do that. We just did what we needed to based on what the province told us to do. So as I just said, to align with Provincial Bill 44, we adopted the new R1, R2, R3, R4, and R5 zones in June 2024. Those permit the development of multiplexes on properties that were previously restricted to single unit and 2 units. That was the RS1 and RS2. So on R1, R4, and R5, you're now allowed to do 5 units. On R2, you can do 2 units, and on R3, you can do 3 units. So we looked at all those properties, counted them all up, counted up the total number of units that could be built on all those, and we found that you could build 16,200 units if every one of those built out to the maximum. And then we counted up how many units were built across all those, and there were 5,000 units. So there's a lot of significant additional capacity. Now we call it theoretical headroom or even false headroom at times, because will all of that get built out to full capacity? Probably not, but we're going through an exercise that the province has asked us to check a box on, and that's what we're doing. So the OCP amendment includes a community-wide breakdown of the unbuilt capacity in a brief table. It highlights a remaining capacity of 11,318 units across the community. It notes the breakdown of these units between primary units, which are the fee simple or strata units, and secondary units, which are the ADUs and suites. The staff report that you have includes a breakdown of the unbuilt capacity across the neighborhoods. So you can see where all that capacity exists. And just out of interest sake, the biggest capacity is found in the Garibaldi Highlands, where there is unbuilt capacity of 5,300 units. And Valley Cliff is the second largest unbuilt capacity at 3,200 units. But, is this all going to get built out? Probably not, but it satisfies the requirement that the province has created for us through this process.
So while you have that up, I have a question about this. So I'll stop you there while it's up. This is with the zoning that exists today. Is that correct? Not when I saw those numbers, particularly around the estates, we've got a public hearing coming on the sub-area plan, and I know in Crumpet, there's something similar. This is with the zoning that exists today. Is that correct? I just wanted to clarify that.
100%. Yeah. And that's why I kind of prefaced it. This is not any of the other things that neighborhood plans, rezonings. This isn't talking about any of that. This is just the R1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that's currently in place. With all that zoning that's in place, this is the both existing units, and the total capacity that could be built if every single one of those properties was built out to its max.
Okay, and for the requirements, I saw that calculation that was a slide or two ago. To hit the 6,300, we obviously have more of that headroom or false headroom, maybe, what, you know, depending on if it gets built out. Is the province accepting, you know, 6,300 capacity? Like if that was something that a community decided to do, does that satisfy what they're technically asking us to do, or does it need to be something well above that that might more realistically represent the amount of available zoned land to achieve 6,300 or whatever the target may be for that community?
Yeah, great question. So I will start out by saying that I think what's happened here is the province had to do something fairly complex for a million different communities. Well, sorry, many different communities in many different situations. And so they've created a really simple process to do it. They basically said, just show us that you've got zoning that accommodates what our calculator spit out. And they actually said, oh, you may find that that small scale multi-unit housing requirement that we placed upon you could satisfy that demand. Now, they have a report that says, hey, here's how you could do it. You could, they say, well, you know, if you wanted to, you could use that calculation. You may need to zone other stuff to add to it. You could follow a path where you start doing calculations of what you think will actually be uptaken over time. But strictly speaking, and having gone to workshops where they were talking specifically about that, they said, you can use the SMA, the Bill 44 zoning to meet this requirement. So without any lack of clarity, this meets what they've told us to do.
Okay, and then just to the last question on this, maybe the last way to ask this is that there was a requirement to do the Bill 44 work that was broad. This is maybe measuring that impact. Like there was no ability to only do the Bill 44 work to achieve the 63-year needs number. Like
that
is that correct?
100% accurate.
Okay, I just want to make sure I have extra clear on what is and isn't happening here. Okay, thank you. Continue.
Oh yeah, this is still me. Oh yeah, the amendment also includes a new map, Schedule B1, which identifies the new R1 to R5 within the growth management boundary where the capacity exists. So we basically mapped it out because it says you have to show us that you can meet it and where that is. So we've mapped out where that is. So that mapping in combination with a table of unbuilt capacity satisfies the provincial requirement to identify where the housing need identified by the housing need report can be easily accommodated within the community on land zoned under the Bill 44 mandate.
So respecting policies to address each class of housing noted in the Housing Needs Report regulation, our existing OCP policy does a good job of addressing diverse housing needs across the continuum and satisfies the regulation. So very limited amendments are being proposed as being required here. So I've just listed on the slide the each class of housing need and the associated policies that we've reviewed with respect to affordable housing, rental housing, special needs housing, seniors housing, family-oriented housing, as well as housing for individuals experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And then we also have a whole suite of policies concerning housing in proximity to active transportation, public transit, and alternative forms of transportation. And those were also outlined in the appendix of the interim housing needs report that we brought to council in December of this year. We just want to call out a couple of additional affordable housing policy amendments just to describe the nature of the amendments that are proposed. We have acknowledged formation of the Squamish Community Housing Society and HEM Housing and the work that continues with all nonprofit housing agencies to identify multi-year targets to grow the diverse range of housing supply and options in Squamish. We've also amended policy, just noting strengthened collaboration with HEM Housing and Squamish Nation. And we've made some minor wording changes and amendments to the CAC policy reference, as well as removal of the reference to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund in relation to delivering affordable units through perpetually affordable rental or price restricted housing. And then lastly, we made an amendment to the short-term rental policy, acknowledging the rental regulation and enforcement program that's now in place. So when we created the OCP, we didn't have that regulatory reform and that policy in place. So we just needed to tweak that to acknowledge that. So our proposed OCP bylaw review engagement activities from May through September, or early fall. Firstly, subject to first reading, we will send the OCP consultation referral letters out pursuant to the Local Government Act. This is recommended as the base legislated consultation required for this OCP amendment. So those referrals would go to Squamish Ohomeo, referral to Squamish School District, Sea to Sky School District 48, the Regional District, Squamish SLRD, and Vancouver Coastal Health. And so because these are largely prescribed and mandated amendments, and many of which are administrative in nature, staff's recommended motion is that consultation with these entities not be ongoing after the first reading referral and input gathering that we would be doing. In addition, we will publish this OCP bylaw on our OCP project page, and also include a written comment opportunity. And we've also already planned for some housing sector focused outreach and feedback session building on this work that we've been doing with the Squamish Community Housing Society and other nonprofit housing organizations, as well as the development community. So for direction, we did note some additional activities that we could do, including a public engagement session or open house, and maybe some informal pop-ups for information sharing. And these are proposed as a lighter touch, more informational engagement, or engagement for information, again, because the amendments are largely prescribed. So we are looking for council direction just to confirm if council would like us to do those additional pieces. We would be happy to do that. That concludes the presentation, and there are 4 motions in front of council for consideration. So number 1, that the District of Squamish OCP bylaw 3139 be given first reading. Number 2, subject to first reading, that council directs staff to initiate external bylaw engagement as outlined in the report tonight. Number 3, that for the purpose of section 475 of the Local Government Act, that the bylaw, this is a tough one, essentially be that for the purpose of section 475 of the Local Government Act, that the bylaw be referred to the board of the Squamish Lillooet Regional District, adjacent regional district or neighbor municipalities, any boards of education, greater boards, improvement district boards, the province or federal governments or their agencies, and Squamish Nation for comment prior to council consideration of second reading, and that consultation not be ongoing after second reading. And then finally, that the bylaw is considered to be consistent with the financial plan and waste management plans pursuant to section 477 of the Local Government Act. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question on the recommendations. At the end of your presentation, you spoke about the public engagement options. Would that be a 5th bullet if you wanted that direction, or is that encompassed in one of these bullets we should consider while we're...
Thank you for that question. That would be encompassed in the recommendation or the motion number 2, and staff would just take that feedback, whether you would like to have staff do those additional activities, or just stick to the sort of the base consultation that's outlined in the report.
Okay. Council, I'd suggest when we're ready for motions that we're explicit in 2 as to what our expectations are, just so we're just not handled in comments. But Councillor French.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So just to pick up on that, if council did opt to direct staff to take on additional public engagement, potentially in the form of informal pop-ups at community gatherings, open houses, other such, would that have any budget impacts, or is there already budget for that?
Thank you for the question. In terms of budget impacts, they would be limited to some additional staff time. And in the report, it outlines a public open house and some informal pop-ups. So there is some budget impact in terms of staff time to deliver those, but they're not major.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hamilton and then Stoner.
Thanks very much. Super detailed question. Loggers East seemed remarkably low in both its number of units and in its possible expansion. Is that because I think it's called the Ravenswood neighborhood, that neighborhood across what would normally the zoning just across from Brennan Park is CD 38, it's not RS1. Is that why Loggers East is showing such a small increase?
Through the chair. The increase is directly related to the number of RS1 or RS2 parcels that existed and were changed to RS123 or R12345. And in Loggers, we didn't have a large number of small lots. Where we see big numbers, there are many small parcels that switched. In Loggers East, there weren't a lot of small numbers. And then when I'm looking at the zoning here, it looks like there are only a small number of lots, and they're very large, that took on that new zoning. So I don't know what the specific zoning was and is, but it's not lots of small R1s.
Yeah, I guess my question is, so let me get the name of the roads there. Along Sparrow Way, Cardinal Drive, those all look like RS1 or R1s, but they're not. They're CD38s. Is that CD38 zoning? I assume it's a comprehensive development zone. Are we intending to keep that as CD38, or should those properties be moved to R1?
That's a good question, through the chair. And I didn't work on the project that made RS1 into R1, so we might have to check in what the specifics are about why those CDs. It has something to do with what the nature of that zone was, and why it didn't transition into R1. I'd have to dig in to find out, and I don't have that answer with me. I could find out and bring it back.
Great, thanks. And that's not urgent for our decision tonight, but I didn't notice it when we were doing the big R1 change, because there was a big change happening everywhere, and this is one small piece. A question about moving forward with the provincial mandated process. We have to do a housing needs report every 5 years. Is the province committed to maintaining the tool that they provided us for as long as we have this requirement in place? The origin of my question is because we can see very big fluctuations in the housing needs depending on how you do the reporting or how you do the calculation. And so I'd be concerned if we have this ongoing need to do the reporting, but it's up to us to figure out how to do the reporting if this tool goes away. So has the province also committed to maintaining the tool as the thing we need to report on?
Through the chair, great question. It hasn't been discussed. At no point have they talked about their maintenance of the tool. I am confident that they aren't going to expect every municipality to replicate that work. It costs a lot of money to go out and do that type of thing. So my guess is, as long as they want this process to work in this way, they're going to have to maintain that tool. But I've never heard them discuss it at any of their meetings. They've been really focused on all these changes they're making right now, and I think that's consuming their attention.
Great. Cross that bridge when they come to it. Fair. And second question, again, third question, again, this is not directly related to the decision tonight, but do you have an idea of how many units are in our development pipeline? It looks like 1,500 units in the next 5 years. Rough ballpark, it seems to me like we're pretty much already at the 1,500 units. If we just look at the development pipeline currently in place, Do we have a rough estimate of that? I assume that's coming from the SIM.
Great question. I don't have that at my fingertips. We could develop that information if that's something council wants us to do. Direct us to it. We'll bring it back.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, would that information be available once the Squamish Insight Model tool is finalized? Is that sort of information that SIM will include?
Yes, the SIM is designed so that in the SIM next component where we're looking at a development pipeline, we break out the units that are in development pipeline by the permit type. So you can look and see what's at building permit, what's at development permit, what's at rezoning, and what's at OCP. And then you can use those as proxies for the amount of time you can anticipate before those become built units. Although, to be honest, actually, one thing that's changed is the building permit units will probably be considered in the Squamish now because they're essentially considered imminent. So you'd look at what's in the development permit stage and assume that's within a couple years, a year, rezoning a few more years, make those decisions.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks to staff for this work. A few questions kind of rooted in what it is that we're actually trying to achieve here. So appreciate that this is provincially mandated. The housing needs report that we did identified 6,300 new units by 2041, and those were broken up into specific categories. So extreme core housing, people experiencing homelessness, suppressed household formation. The proposed OCP amendments don't actually address these categories in the numbers that we're providing. So I appreciate we've added some policy, and some of our existing policy was quite strong, but I'm kind of surprised that we're not actually matching those numbers of what are identified in the housing needs report for those categories with what we see as becoming available through these amendments. So can you just speak to why we wouldn't actually match those or try to match those?
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you. Good question. And I think a very sensible question. It would be an appropriate strategy to try and figure out how you are going to actually deliver on those categories. That would be a much more involved project with deeper level of analysis and probably a lot more variables in terms of the chance of getting that matching right and understanding what's coming down the pipe for those different categories. The approach that we've undertaken here is aligned with what the province has asked us to do. They have made no indication in any of their material or in any of their meetings that that's not only is that an expectation, but they've never even talked about that as being something that they would like to do. It certainly would make sense, but that's not the task that they've asked communities to do. They've just said, hey, here's how many units you need for a variety of reasons. Now, show us that you can do a bunch of units where that number matches, no correlation. And I think they also said, and show us that you've got policy that's aligned with this variety of units. But yeah, very sensible approach, not what we've been asked to do, and much more intensive to try and do that. So we haven't proposed that.
I think that's a very fair response and further solidifies my thought that this is more of a make work project from the province than necessarily achieving the goals that we're set out to achieve. But appreciate the work that staff are doing here to reach the goals that have been set out by the province. Further to that, the numbers as presented for the small scale housing units are limited in other factors to be able to actually achieve them. So for Valley Cliff, for example, we know that there's limitations even just to the road network in and out, that as presented an additional 3,000 units or so that was on your previous slide just isn't actually going to be feasible unless there's an upgrade to the road access in and out. And so how have we accounted for that, if at all, in this process?
Through the chair, another good question. And this is actually a question that's driven a lot of concern from municipalities about this small scale multi-unit housing across the province just in general. Theoretically, you could say, yeah, there's constraints and those would be handled by building a new interchange. You know, like you could start coming up with ways that some of these constraints could be overcome. They would cost a lot of money. Is it realistic? Probably not. Again, this is another indication that we're checking a box here. I think I use that term false headroom to describe what this number represents. I think it's realistic to keep that in mind. There are lots of constraints. You highlighted one. There are a lot more that could constrain this full build out. I don't think we should look at this number and say, hey, we've got lots of housing coming that's going to satisfy all these needs based on this. This is why we want to keep doing rezonings and keep contemplating with more detailed analysis. But this is not the project where we've decided to do that. This is a project where we're trying to fulfill the requirement that's been placed upon us.
Okay, I did have a few other questions, but I'll hold them because they're in similar line, and I think I just need to wrap my head around this from an like I think that goes more to the engagement factor, where it's maybe not worth doing very much deep engagement, given that I think this will just raise more concerns and questions than anything else. My last question was in section 12.10. We've added the word affordable to that particular policy, which is maintain a local affordable housing inventory and conduct an annual housing needs survey. And I just wonder, one, why we added affordable, and also if this is still needed, given that we have to do this every 5 years. So is this repetitive to the housing needs report? And or why is this specific to affordable housing, especially now that we know that we have challenges across the full spectrum of housing, not necessarily just in the below market area, but also moving people through the continuum.
Sarah here, Councillor Stoner through the chair. Could you just repeat the reference to the policy number
12.10A.
Thank you for the question. This whole subsection deals with affordable housing. And so that addition of the word affordable was to highlight the affordable housing inventory. So connected to the delivery of specifically affordable housing, there's the need to continue to inventory and do needs assessment. So we were just clarifying that that's sort of like a subset of housing that we were focused in terms of inventory and target setting as well.
Okay, other questions? And I'll come back. And Councillor Stoner, sounds like you might have some additional ones here, but I'll just give a chance for the room. And then any other questions on this? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
I was going to test a motion if we're ready for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to test a slight change to number 1. Just figured it's easier to, and then do the rest after. That District of Squamish Official Community Plan number 2500-2017 Amendment Bylaw Interim Housing Needs Report number 3139-2025 be given first reading with the following changes. 1, that 12.8 CI be amended to read avoidance and or mitigation of risk from hazards such as flooding, debris flow, wildfire interface, geological infrastructure, and industrial hazards. And 12.12D be added to read prioritize the development of permanent housing as a solution for new large-scale commercial or industrial employment housing needs. And I can forward that to folks and speak to it if it's seconded.
Okay. Councillor Greenlaw seconds, and I'd appreciate if you could forward that
just do
that around. Maybe a second to do that, and then you can speak to your motion.
So these are just 2 changes in the sections that are being edited, which I think speak directly to the topics, and I would put them in the same ballpark as sort of corrections or clarifications, like with the STR piece and I can't remember. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. There's a couple other sort of corrective things. I think there for the hazard piece, it's important that we just manage risk appropriately, and the the cause of the risk doesn't matter so much. It's if there's a risk, we need to address it, I think. And so just putting that clarity. The second one is, and I, the thought comes up with wood fiber. I haven't read the new EA amendment, so I don't know if it's relevant there. But I think in the context, especially of all the new policy, it seems very implicit, strongly implicit to me that we are really pushing towards as much permanent housing as possible. And so I think we should, in general, prioritize that. There may be, I didn't put require because there may be circumstances we need to consider, but I think that adds some explicit clarity to what I think is quite implicit in a number of the changes we've made. So for me, these are two clarification points that I think fit within the spirit of what we're trying to do here and the scope, and I think makes sense given the discussions that are happening right now.
Thank you. Other comments on this? I'm speaking in support of the motion. I think I think both of these changes sort of reflect what where we are. When I think about developments coming to us that are, say, adjacent to the train tracks, I wouldn't say that's a natural hazard, but it is something that we need to ensure that appropriate measures are taken to mitigate the risk to the future residents there. So this doesn't feel to me that it's super onerous. We are giving first reading here. Perhaps this is something we need to revisit. I'm curious to see if there's some unintended consequence here going forward. But on my first assessment, this does more accurately reflect what our practice is so far. And then broadly on the rest of it, I do think this is a make work project, and sort of finishing the dotting the I's and crossing the T's on something that has been we've been legislated to do. But it is a bit challenging. The one image that was up for quite a while is the mapping of where these things will occur. And I think for the community to understand the nuance around this is reflecting those provincial mandated changes that we've done, and sort of signaling and enshrining those changes in our OCP, but do not represent the totality of what's happening or what may happen in the community over time. So I find that concept challenging, but as does the rest of the population of the province. So I think that this is an appropriate action here, but I think some more conversation around what engagement we should do with the community on this particular piece is I would welcome. That'll be in a subsequent motion. This is just the first reading that we're considering here, so I'll hold my comments to that. Any other comments on first reading? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Was that an oppose or approve, Councillor Starr? Sorry, it was a bit of a lag.
I'm in support of that. Thanks.
Supportive. Okay. Thank you. So, so next we've got two or three remaining motions. I'm going to move the remainder of these as a group, and I'll speak to it if it's seconded. Second by Councillor Pettingill. The way I read these and relate it to the staff report is that the engagement would be with those external parties and not more broadly with the community. I think that this piece really is reflecting changes we've already made to the zoning bylaw at the requirement of the province. So if this was the first phase and then zoning was to follow, which could have been one of the orders that this happened, I think it would make sense to engage more fully with the community. The community's already been rezoned to meet these. We're just realigning the OCP with the zoning that we have now. So I don't think that this particular piece requires or would advance the community's I don't think we should spend our time engaging deeper on this particular piece. We do have other initiatives that will take some engagement with direct engagement with the community on. So I don't think this is this project meets that threshold for me, given it's more of a catch up than a leaning into something that's new. So that's how I read this the item 2 on our list and as it was presented. So if someone would like to, if others aren't aligned with that, we can have a discussion here. I'd welcome an amendment otherwise, but otherwise it's as laid out, which is the lighter touch on the engagement piece. But happy to support and appreciate that. Any other comments on these remainder steps? Sorry, I've lost count. Yeah, Councillor Stoner, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. And sorry I didn't actually speak to first reading, but I agree that limited engagement on this is probably the most effective way forward. I, again, appreciate staff's work on this in trying to achieve the provincial requirements that have been set out, but I am really hesitant about moving it forward, just given how we know this will interact with other policies that exist in the OCP, that we are identifying potential units as zoned under the small scale multi-unit housing, but there's a number that just wouldn't be feasible to move forward for a number of reasons. And so I think actually in many ways we're doing ourselves a disservice in setting out these numbers, because I think they're false expectations in a lot of ways. And so what I would actually request is, as we move this forward, that my council colleagues consider bringing this forward as a minister meeting at UBCM to reflect some of the challenges that we're experiencing here, and really let the province know that this is actually not a very effective use or tool, and is actually draining resources when we could actually be achieving real housing for our community, as opposed to just make work rezoning projects. That is not a reflection on the work that our staff have done. It is excellent work as we try and achieve the components that have been set out by the province. I just think it also sets up a bit of a false expectation, given that we know that many of those units won't be built out in that way. So agree with the direction, that this is, I think we just get this over the finish line and we do it in a lean way, and we minimize engagement on it, and we provide feedback to the province would be my preferred approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands for comment at this point, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Council, I'm going to suggest we'll take a 10-minute recess and then we'll continue on with the agenda. So if the folks for the next presentation want to get set up, they're welcome to do so. And then we'll be back at, let's take a 12-minute break. So we'll call it at 7:50. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. We are on to the District of Squamish Subdivision and Development Control Bylaw, and this is around downtown public realm and streetscape design guidelines. So I'll turn over to our staff to run us through the presentation.
So good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Carrie Hamilton, planner at the District of Squamish, presenting to you today the Downtown Streetscape and Accessibility Guidelines for endorsement and bylaw readings. With me today, I have the Director of Development Engineering, Dave Merrow, and the Director of Public Works, Devin Kiyonaga. So the purpose of today is to present to Council two technical documents for endorsement: the District of Squamish Downtown Public Realm and Streetscape Design Guidelines, which we are calling Streetscape Guidelines for short, and the Streetscape Universal Accessibility Guidelines, which we are calling Accessible Guidelines for short. The report and motion also include a bylaw amendment to the Subdivision and Development Control Bylaw, S&DC Bylaw for short, and to account for these new technical guideline documents. These documents provide guidance on creating predictable standards for activated, accessible, sustainable, and inclusive streetscapes, which help improve service delivery when processing downtown development applications and are aligned with Council's strategic plan through connected and livable community and reliable service delivery. So this slide represents a brief timeline on how we got here. And as you can see, it's been a long journey so far. Downtown Squamish underwent a series of visioning and concept planning studies in 2000 and 2005, creating some of the first recorded streetscape concepts for downtown Squamish. In 2015, Schedule H, the Downtown Streetscape Standards, were added to the district's S&DC bylaw to provide some guidance on downtown streetscape redevelopment, particularly for Cleveland Avenue. In 2017, a new OCP was adopted, which followed several downtown-specific or downtown-included other policy documents that provided general guidance on various aspects of downtown public realm. I'm realizing I didn't show the visuals, downtown public realm and streetscape design. As downtown Squamish development applications increased, streetscape review challenges were emerging on how to design streetscapes in accordance with the policy directions, resulting in lengthy servicing agreement reviews and approvals. The streetscape guideline work was initiated by staff in 2019 to try and address this gap and create consistent streetscape redevelopment guidance amongst various development projects and consultants. The downtown streetscape work was endorsed by Council in the 2020 budget and was put on pause during pandemic responses. It resumed in 2022 and added an accessibility scope, and the guideline document has continued to be a staff-led initiative through consultant support with PWL partnership. So technical streetscape guidelines documents are common tools used by municipalities to provide guidance for streetscape development. Unlike policy documents that outline the broad principles and direction, the what and the why, technical guidelines provide the specific detailed instructions on how to apply policy direction. Policy documents tend to be more general and less frequent, while technical guidelines act more as procedures that are more specific and often revised as needed. The technical streetscape guidelines follow the key studies, operation plans, and policies outlined in the flowchart on this slide. The list reflects existing policy documents approved by Council that have outlined the what and why, while the streetscape guidelines provides the detailed guidance on the how. Streetscape guidelines are not regulation and can be revised without Council amendments, as sometimes the how needs amendments with new best practices and technical feedback. The accessibility guidelines were intended to be included in the streetscape guidelines, but were found to be helpful and relevant to all Squamish streetscapes, not just downtown, so are presented as a standalone document for endorsement. So I'd like to take some time to briefly highlight the content in each guideline document. The public realm and streetscape design guidelines are broken into 4 sections: overview, general guidelines, streetscape standards, and streetscape product list. I'll provide an example of each section to provide a general overview of the document for Council. So the first overview section includes relevant information about why the document was created and what it provides guidance on, including a scope map. Most importantly, it provides a much needed centralized document to guide staff, development, and design professionals. and was created as a technical guideline document to inform staff, landscape and civil consultants, so that we can build a consistent and standardized streetscape design through frontage redevelopment. The general guidelines section includes 16 different topic areas. Each section includes a section highlighting relevant policy or regulation, where the what and why for the technical guidelines are based from. Some of the topics include maps or images to provide further visual direction for the guidelines. In this example, you can see the bicycle infrastructure map, which reflects the OCP Active Transportation Map approved by Council. It includes recent Council-approved amendments to move the bicycle infrastructure route from Main Street to Victoria Street, and includes recent Council-approved developments with active transportation routes that connect into the downtown network. Each section includes technical guideline sections. In this example, the guidelines provide specific guidance on what best practice documents to follow for bicycle facility design, what PATE standards to use so we don't create maintenance issues, what signage and stencils to use for different crossing applications, and what cycling-related applications could be considered for bike lanes that pass through corner plazas that were identified and approved in the OCP through Council. So the third section of this document provides detailed plan and cross sections for technical streetscape redevelopment. The document provides streetscape standards for most streets downtown. Given we have different road right-of-way widths and desired uses for different streets, most streetscapes have their own unique design, highlighting the complexity of streetscape redevelopment. In this slide, I'll review some of the types of technical details provided in these sections and the considerations that led to these details. So for instance, streetscape standards provide direction on not only the streetscape cross sections, but how these cross sections are designed when special features, such as mid-block crossings, are desired. Mid-block designs need to consider appropriate distances from parked vehicles, appropriate landscape vegetation for sightlines, and sometimes include unique details, such as how to design for bike lane crossings, or ensure the drive aisle widths can still accommodate desired transit lane widths. The streetscape standards also include below the surface technical details, such as irrigation connections, root barrier locations to prevent tree root damage to sidewalks, and soil depth to ensure adequate soil volumes for street trees. Some further examples to demonstrate the technical complexities and considerations of this section can be demonstrated in this small paving and planter detail. In 2015, Schedule H, Streetscape Standards recommended a banding design for urban sidewalks on Cleveland and 2nd Avenue. The bands were exposed aggregate, the boulevard was a charcoal concrete, and the sidewalk a normal color concrete. Planters were recommended to be contained within a concrete perimeter. The multiple concrete types and applications required 4 separate concrete pours, as well as additional finishing for the exposed aggregate. Through the streetscape guidelines process, it was learned that exposed aggregate is known to be slippery in wet climates and is not considered a smooth surface for accessibility needs, and is now not a recommended sidewalk application. When designing these streetscape details, banding considerations also needed to include the complexity of how to apply planters or tree grates while considering adequate space for people getting out of their parked cars. The new designs also removed concrete barriers around planters, as this was found to impact sidewalk drainage, cause damage to car doors, and cause sidewalk cracking. The standards today reduce concrete construction costs, complexity, and climate impacts. So the final section, the streetscape product list, was identified as an important area primarily for public works in order to reduce maintenance and provide consistent products that work well with our climate and needs as a community. This process was initiated through a procurement process in 2021 and was reviewed for technical considerations of each product. For example, as a community with active bears, it was important to spec a product that were not just bear smart, as many claim to be, but wildlife resistant certified. The details of tree grates can become important to ensure the finishings are correct for our climate, including anti-slip coatings for wet conditions and rust preventing coatings. All extra costs that, if not specified, can lead to more maintenance and potential hazards. Bench and table details provide ranges of use and application. with brand colored chairs, sustainable and reduced maintenance, wood benches and tables, and also with cheaper, cost-effective, and low-maintenance recycling plastic products. One of the most helpful tools in this section, in my opinion, is found on page 210 of this document, which provides detailed product spec sheets and helpful maintenance directions for each product. This ensures we are delivering consistent furnishing products in downtown Squamish while ensuring there are easy to find maintenance guidelines. Moving into the Streetscape Universal Accessibility Guidelines, these guidelines are developed supported by a financial contribution from Vancouver Coastal Health, with references and content summarized by Baristo and Associates Engineering, and visual graphics prepared by PWL Partnership. The guideline content was reviewed and guided by District of Squamish Accessibility Committee, local accessibility consultants, and Squamish workshops with the Canadian Institute of the Blind and accessibility stakeholders. This is a document made by accessibility users for accessible use. It includes 7 sections relevant to the streetscape and public realm design, and includes helpful details to address some of the common concerns or issues the district and accessibility committee have raised, such as parking stall designs and standardized accessible signage application, or intersection crosswalk details, not only to ensure that tactile surfacing is in place, but to ensure it's installed correctly and with the appropriate slopes and grades. The guidelines also highlight how universal accessibility can be considered in public realm design. For example, ensuring there are resting spots beside benches for wheelchair users, while also creating a multi-purpose space for strollers or walkers to be stored away from the sidewalk. So to support the guidelines document, amendments are proposed to this S&DC bylaw. Currently, as previously stated, Schedule H is referenced in the bylaw and then embedded in Schedule H of the bylaw. Proposed changes include changing the name references to address the new streetscape document and to remove the streetscape guidelines from the bylaw and keep Schedule H as a reference to this guideline document only. This allows changes to the technical guideline at engineering discretion or as best practices change without requiring council approval. This is a similar approach to how the streetscape lighting design criteria document was endorsed and approved by council in 2022. Schedule F is a street tree schedule that includes specific downtown references. These references were sometimes misaligned with Schedule H. So downtown specific regulation is proposed to remove any references of the streetscape guideline and reference the streetscape guideline instead. So the streetscape guideline technical document underwent a series of internal and stakeholder meetings, reviews, site visits, scope additions, and consultant guidance to develop the guidelines technical recommendations. The graphic provided in this report documents in this report and in the document and in this slideshow is a brief overview of how each section was established. The beautiful image of Junction Park highlights an important engagement partner in the development of these guidelines, our Public Works Department. Amongst this beautiful landscape are 4 park staff maintaining the garden beds. Streetscapes are public land, and as downtown develops, streetscape upgrades are happening with or without these guidelines. Although the technical details in this document were designed to minimize maintenance needs, streetscape redevelopment will result in increased maintenance needs to the district, highlighting the importance of considering public works staffing, maintenance, and equipment in future growth budgets. So staff is recommending that the District of Squamish Subdivision Development Control Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw number 3154/2025 be given first 3 readings, and that Council endorse the District of Squamish Downtown Public Realm and Streetscape Design Guidelines and the District of Squamish Streetscape Universal Accessibility Guidelines. That concludes my presentation. I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Council, questions? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
I wonder if, and I'm sorry if I have missed it in the documentation, but how do we define downtown as far as geographic scope? As over the years and through the various plans that have been mentioned in the presentation, the definition of downtown has changed. In the 3 different attempts to do a downtown neighborhood plan, there's been 3 different definitions of how far it extends. For example, the corridor trail through Rose Park or Scott Crescent in the OCP, they're part of downtown in a designation. What about the Adventure Center? What is the scope of that is intended in that respect? How do we define downtown for the purpose of these guidelines in this document?
Through the mayor, thank you for that question and for raising the complexities of defining downtown, which is precisely why in this document there is a map that visually depicts the downtown we are defining in this particular instance. I will acknowledge that it does not match some of the downtown definitions that we use in planning as a larger scale of downtown, but that has to do with the fact that a lot of the other land parcels are part of larger development projects and have their own sub-area plans or have their own development plans. And particularly this project is focused on our downtown core where we're seeing development parcel by parcel.
Thank you. I very much admire the work that's done here and to use the phrase used in the report, Ms. Hamilton, policy guideline document. As such, it's a splendid compendium, and I think it will serve us in the long run. My question is, I see that you've noted the Downtown 2000 plan and the 2005 work, and I really applaud that. There's one policy document, however, I wondered whether it might be considered and included, if there is such an opportunity, and that is the Marine Action Strategy. The Marine Action Strategy under Focus Area 4 has two policies, recommendations, directions that are directly applicable, and they are 4.31, celebrate Squamish marine tradition, history, and culture in interpretive kiosks, that sort of thing, and section 4.12 B2, sorry about all of these initials, but design and integrate marine focused interpretive signage program along the marine areas, of course, including the downtown. So my question, Ms. Hamilton, is whether the Marine Action Strategy, these specific recommendations regarding interpretive kiosks, if you like, signage in the public realm, including in the downtown, can that be included in this report, since we've gone so far to produce this wonderful compendium and reference?
Through the mayor, certainly we can certainly review that document and make appropriate references to it where it should be referenced in this document.
Thank you. My next question concerns how we might address natural history interpretive signage, or kiosk, if you like, if I use that generally, and heritage. They both kind of are quite similar in their circumstances and how they might take shape. And they're distinct from public art, and yet they share a lot of circumstances with public art. So my question is, can we interpret public art to include natural history interpretive signage, heritage interpretive signage, the physical aspects of which for streetscape design are quite similar and important? I wonder if we can broaden that interpretation of public art to include these other categories of signage and features.
Through the mayor, may I ask Councillor Aronson to provide an example of what interpretive signage would look like, just for context?
Thank you. I'll be glad to, and I'll point to an example with a specific intent. At the Sirocco Waterfront, there are 3 heritage kiosks. They are affixed to the railing of the waterfront walkway. And you'd have to be about 5'4", 5'6" standing to be able to read them. And I use this as an example because I think here's a case, an illustration of why we need standards for accessibility, for children to be able to read the darn things. So that is an example of something like, it's broadly public art, but it's an interpretive signage or kiosk which belongs in some set of standards. Where can we address that type of situation in these guidelines? If I may offer that Sirocco, these installations as an example of a need.
Thank you to the Mayor and Councilor Anderson for providing that clarification. Interpretive signage is noted in the MEMCOM blind channel detailed design, and it is noted as something that should be considered in those particular designs. I appreciate the concerns that Councilor Anderson has raised in terms of the making sure that the height is appropriate and the application of where it's positioned is appropriate. The guideline document does provide a technical guideline around railings for the MEMCOM blind channel. We can certainly look to include something that might speak to that, but I think we are very much aware of those concerns currently on Sirocco, and we've been doing better moving forward with further interpretation signage. And we could potentially include maybe just a small note to make sure that these are accessible when they are applied.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hamilton, Pettingill, then Stoner.
Thanks very much. I was wondering when I read this, when this process started, I was like, well, how did I not hear about the start of this process? And now I see why I didn't hear about the start of this process. It was long before I arrived on council. So thank you for bringing this on its long journey. A question about how are there places in this policy that interact with other bylaws and potentially conflict with other bylaws, like say, snow removal and snow clearing? This document presents priority laneways, that sort of thing, whereas our snow removal bylaw also does the same thing. I assume at this point those are consistent. But is the vision to try to keep all these, to keep any change in one consistent with the change in the other? How do we plan on evolving this sort of master document with all of the bylaws that it touches?
Thank you, through council. It's a great question. Those are some of the challenges as to why we actually created this document in the first place, was that we had conflicting guidelines, or we would have policy documents from 2017 and then amendments in 2019, and then they didn't reflect one another. There is some guideline context and written text in this guideline to say if there are change or just discrepancies between bylaws and this guideline, that the discretion is to the engineer to make the appropriate call. So the hope is that, say, if we do amend a regulation bylaw and this is out of date, that the district engineer would be aware of that, or Public Works would be aware of that snow removal change, and then we would be able to apply that. The intention here is to at least provide a somewhat altogether document so that a developer or a consultant has an easy process to find all of this information.
So is this document envisioned to be something that can be edited very simply, just made a change in the bylaw and update this at the same time? Or are you envisioning the engineers needing to keep any changes in mind, sort of thing?
Through the mayor, certainly this document, we may, as we start using it, we'll find some errors in it, and we do plan to make amendments to it over time, and it can be easily amended without coming back to council, as it's going to be separated from the subdivision development control bylaw.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Yeah, it's the separation from the bylaw that I see now why that's structurally important. So that's good. Thank you. Second question. Oceanfront Peninsula is not included, and that's because it's within a larger sub-area plan. But I would assume that these same guidelines would still apply there, if these are general best practice and the way that we want our downtown to look and feel. I would assume we'd want that to continue onto the Oceanfront Peninsula. Is that assumption correct, or is there some reason why these guidelines would not apply to the Oceanfront?
Yes, through the mayor. So the Oceanfront did secure the subdivision development control bylaw at the time that it was adopted. And so any of these changes to the subdivision development control bylaw would not apply to that development. However, we have worked with that development team over the years to, as we've been developing these guidelines, they've been helping us with the railing design. They've conformed to the lighting design guidelines. So there is a general best practice to try and apply these, but their cross sections for their road are different and they're secured through a different agreement.
Do you happen to know when that was, and this is just out of curiosity, when that was signed, when that was put in ink?
Through the mayor, Dave Merrow, Director of Development Engineering. So the phase development agreement in 2015 secured the subdivision development control bylaw requirements at the time for the duration of the PDA term, which is 20 years. As Ms. Hamilton alluded to, the developer has been very open to working with staff to actually use current standards as we've designed the streetscapes on the oceanfront.
Thanks very much. Yeah, that the 10 years between when it was set and when we haven't even really meaningfully started that development. We haven't seen it much come online there. That speaks to an impressive length of time between when we set these policies and when they come to fruition. So thanks.
Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I have sort of two categories of questions. One is sort of bike routes, given the content and the guidelines, and then the others on sort of specific guideline pieces. And I'm trying to absorb the piece of that this would be a sort of a staff maintained document as opposed to the subdivision control bylaw, which council controls. But I'll start with the sort of some of the guideline related questions. So we've had some discussion around contiguous rain protection, and my feeling or recollection is that's still a desire, but I didn't see that here, and I'm wondering how or why not we're addressing that in terms of awnings and overhangs and so on.
So through the mayor, that guideline is already in our official community plan in development permit area 3. So that desire to have covered sidewalks is already accounted for in our development review. And what we actually have done in relation to streetscapes is just provide a bit of a guidance on how to limit the height or the width of that canopy to 2 meters so that it's not starting to conflict with trees, which we have seen happen. So it is it's addressed in the technical streetscape standards section to have a limit of the awnings in there.
Okay, that's helpful. And it relates to a question then because a piece of this, I think, is probably related to wheelchair accessibility. And is there something that speaks to how wheelchairs, if you're in a wheelchair, you can stay under the covered portion? And even aside from that, if you're in a wheelchair, I didn't see anything speaking to straight line routes, which I would assume would be preferable if you're in a mobile device of some sort. And so is there anything or how would we address those sort of accessibility pieces?
Certainly. So through the mayor, all of the streetscape standards currently have sidewalks adjacent to property lines. So the intention in most of our downtown developments, especially in our urban core, where this is important, are at zero lot line. So there would likely in all designs would have a sidewalk adjacent to that building, and the awnings would cover those sidewalks. Our sidewalk widths vary. They vary from 2 meters to 2.5 meters. So they may not cover all the sidewalk, but definitely would cover a width that would be needed for accessibility needs. And there is, I'll further speak to it, that we did provide some guidance in the patio and parklet section that speaks to wanting to have desired sidewalk lines and consistent, and making sure that if we are moving the sidewalk in any way, that we are ensuring that we're providing accessibility routes and appropriate widths to ensure that we can accommodate that.
Okay, thank you. And I've got a few, so.
Well, I'll give you the hook when the time hits. Don't worry, you'll know.
I didn't see anything about bike charging infrastructure, and really, in my mind, at this point, it could be just plugs that you could plug your charger into. I'm wondering why we haven't included that, or did I miss that, or is that something we could include?
Through the mayor, I may defer to our public works expert here, but I can speak to some of the comments that we've received from our public works staff who are in charge of electricity, and just some of the concerns around having public access to electricity through either our light posts or things where we have public accessibility access, and how to manage that and maintain that. So at this time, that's not been considered in these guidelines at this time. If you have anything further to add.
Okay, you know, given our mode shift ambitions, that may be something we need to reconsider a lot sooner rather than later. I didn't see anything, and maybe this is, I'm not sure if this is policy or belongs in the guidelines or a bit of both. And actually, it's maybe true for a number of these things I'm bringing up, but public washrooms, water fountains, doggy fountains, sort of rain and wind protected areas to tie up dogs, given how prevalent dogs are. And you know, we seem to want to activate the spaces, and there's a lot of design elements that really seem to do that. But then you, I think, need public bathrooms and so on. So some of those sorts of things, how do we, is that addressed elsewhere? Is that something that we would address here?
Through the mayor, a lot of this work is taken from existing policy documents that we have. We do have a Parks and Rec master plan. It is dated 2012, but I believe it's coming forward for some amendments in a future redesign in the future. And so I'd expect things like public washrooms and some of these more amenities that are more park related to come from that document. And once we get that document in place and council's approved it, then we could foresee kind of some amendments to this to reflect those changes. But at this time, this document wasn't a tool to try and start new things that we haven't already addressed in policy.
Okay, thank you. And then I was wondering, sort of two, in my mind, a little bit related, standards around encouraging or discouraging youth play, like skateboarding or scooters or whatever on surfaces, and then sort of some of our unhoused population. The benches don't seem to be those ones that discourage sleeping, and you know, maybe it's the policy belongs elsewhere, but we sort of have an implied policy of enabling someone to have a bench to lie down on and so on. And I was just sort of wondering, and maybe what I've heard is that the sort of our position on that, our thought on that perspective belongs in a different document, which we need to do. And then the guidelines would follow those things. And we don't have that policy on these topics. So that's why the guidelines are what they are. Is that?
Through the mayor, yes, I would say for the most part, and I'll just highlight that we haven't highlighted any skateboard deterring details in any of the furnishings. So we haven't really broached that topic in this design.
Okay. And then the final thing in this cohort of questions, I guess, is most of the bike racks made sense to me, but there was one, I think it was the bike rack D I had noted. In my experience, those are not very functional bike racks for many of the e-bikes. You don't fit under and so on. And so I was a bit curious why that particular one was in the guidelines. And maybe people have had a different experience than me, but.
So through the mayor, historically, we, in the old Schedule H design, we had the I don't know how to,
Slinky?
The slinky design, the multiple hoops that are connected. And we heard from multiple users that this was problematic for many users. This has been a standard design that seems to come from active transportation best practices that do tend to work. They might not work for all bikes, but they do work better than the slinky design, and try to address again, the locking component that's desired, which is the tire and frame together, which the slinky design doesn't really support and allow for.
I'll just add, I've found in general, anything that has a vertical crossbar seems to not fit a whole lot of bikes. And so, you know, or sorry, sticking to vertical posts seems to be great. It's when you get the horizontal crossbar that things don't fit under, and it's, so for what it's worth. But thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Stoner now.
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks to staff for all the work and for the cross-departmental engagement, I think, is really great on this file. I did notice that there was some external engagement, and I appreciate that this is a technical document, but I am curious about engagement with like the downtown BIA, our Squamish, other organizations that would really fit into the realm of downtown public realm, and if they were consulted, and if so, when, and if not, why not?
Certainly. So for the public realm elements, we have relied on the other policy work that has been done. So our Squamish did prepare a public space design guideline document, which we've referenced in here. And we've also, there's been public art engagement with the BIA and our Squamish and other kind of groups around the public realm elements. So we did not specifically go out to them because we were basically applying the policy direction from that and providing more of the technical details around how to apply those pieces more from a public works maintenance perspective or from a functionality engineering or TAP guidelines reference. So we're taking kind of that policy work and the engagement that was done and then making sure that these guidelines are reflecting more of that, the technical details.
Okay, I will sit with that for a little bit. A few detailed questions. On the product list, none of the picnic tables shown or selected have accessible overhangs on them, which I would have expected given this focus on the secondary portion of this document. And so I'm just curious why none of those would actually address our accessibility components.
So through the mayor, in those technical documents, they do provide a technical spec for the accessibility option. So although the image just shows a standard picnic bench, there is an accessibility option for some of those benches.
Okay, I will look into that. And then the trees and planting section. So it does make reference to planting coniferous trees, which we've actually explicitly moved away from in our wildfire DPA. So section 44.81 specifically reads that the following fire-prone coniferous plants should not be used in landscaping: juniper, cedar, and yew. And a number of the specific streets actually identify cedar as a proposed planting. Can you speak to why we would go counter to our own DPAs?
So through the mayor, the cedar that they're referring to in those wildfire bylaws and guidelines are a hedge. They are not a cedar tree. And we have included all of the guidelines from the bylaw in terms of spacing for downtown streetscapes. So they all comply to the wildfire regulations around spacing of planting and spacing of trees.
Okay, and then following up on that, how does the proposal in this document address, if at all, the forthcoming work on the tree canopy that we are expected to see in the next few weeks?
So through the mayor, this section provides a bit of background of some of the benefits of street trees, but the urban street tree canopy document is really focused on tree canopy percentages and targets and a number of details that are not included in this document. What this document is specifically focused on is kind of soil and tree species, which currently exist in our Schedule H and Schedule F. And what we've done is amend them to meet current best practices with drought-tolerant trees, wildfire, a bear smart, local native species, all those things that our guidelines already speak to, but just providing an actual species to help people apply that.
Okay, that's helpful. Then on the parking sections, there's a few comments that I'm just curious about. So two in particular. So this is section 2.8. One is that there's a suggestion to remove angled parking, and I'm curious about that, as well as the document reads that line painting should not be used to delineate parking spaces. And I'm also curious about that direction.
So through the mayor, the angled design, while we were creating the streetscape design guidelines, the angled design takes up a lot of that road right-of-way width. And when we presented streetscape details for in 2017 to the public and to council to talk about how to add bike lanes and how to add, how to redevelop our streetscapes, which streets will promote what, it was recognized that we were moving away from angled parking designs on our street because of the space that it takes up. So all of our streetscape standards don't have angled parking. So the intention of that clause is just to highlight that any kind of existing angled parking would be moved to parallel parking if it's designated as a parking street. And then for your second question, in terms of line painting, we get this question quite often in district engineering and review. And the direction has been to we've explored different options over the years with development frontage upgrades, and the direction has been to reduce line painting overall, to reduce the overall public work cost on line painting, as well as the non-compliance that we're getting with line painting. Our stalls typically are quite long, and what we're finding is that there's potentially more space that we can gain for street parking by not having lines. So that's why that direction is in there.
Okay, on the angled parking component, as we move away from that, I feel like it takes up more street space, but it's actually a really efficient way to park vehicles on a street in terms of the number of spaces it can provide. And so I'm just curious about the trade-off there.
So through the mayor, certainly there are a number of trade-offs. Sometimes there's also trade-offs in safety. So anything that has a bike lane design, it's not recommended to have angled parking in bike lane designs. They also can cause sightline concerns for backing in and out of them. And it's not to say that, we do have some streets where they may be maintained and maybe kept for a while. So it's not saying that we're removing all of them right away, but that in the general guidelines, as we move forward to upgrade our frontages, that we are moving away from angled parking design in that. And that's in order to, the trade-offs would be wider sidewalks, they would be boulevard spaces for trees and furnishing and any of those details. So those would be some of the considerations.
Okay, and then one last question on the parking piece. This is section 2.83 around accessible parking. And I'm just curious if it'd be worthwhile including some policy language here that increases the amount of accessible parking stalls near an event site when streets are closed for community events. So often what we see, if we shut down some streets, we actually lose a lot of the accessible parking, and or it becomes more difficult for folks who have accessibility challenges to get to that event because parking is more limited. So I just wonder if this is an opportunity to highlight a direction in policy there to increase the number of accessibilities or accessible spaces in events.
So through the mayor, I agree with that concern. I would say that an amendment like that should probably live in an event policy document or something as like how to run events, and these are the things to consider. These are intended to be guidelines for kind of redevelopment, so finalized streetscape design and not kind of temporary designs. So I would, although I agree with the concern, I don't know if it should live in this particular document.
Okay. I have a couple of questions myself. I'm going to go back to Councillor Pettingill, I think, unless I was curious about. Thank you for starting your presentation with the understanding of what versus how. I was trying to sift through as I was trying to digest this, like, okay, all these pieces seem to come from somewhere, and what is, if there is anything that's significant, or that lives exclusively here. And I'm hearing that there's very little that lives exclusively here. This is sort of the collection point for all that. So as I'm processing that in the background, the section on undergrounding services. So this is 2.16.1, or yeah, that section. That's the current undergrounding area. It says that one of the sentences, the district recognizes the undergrounding of all electrical utilities along district frontages may not always be feasible, economically viable, or supported by the utility authority. And I just wonder what, I can think of some examples. I saw some examples when I went for dinner here down the street, where we seem to have, just in this block, a mix of electrical underground and other, apparently still above ground. And just how, given that this isn't there's, all the other pieces sort of feed into this technical document, how are we still getting that outcome, and how do we ensure that we, that this may not always be feasible piece isn't sort of the default, and we end up with undesired outcomes? We'll see.
It's a really great point, and it's something that I know my colleagues here and I have been dealing with for quite some time around some direction on how to underground. As you can see from this document, there's BC Hydro kind of information points to provide more detail, and we've worked really closely with them to try and find a path forward for this challenge. There are a number of challenges for undergrounding hydro or overhead electrical, piecemeal by piecemeal. Ideally, it's done block by block or in big sections, and there's really good rationale from BC Hydro around that. And so what this document has done is really provide clear direction for our staff and for developers that are coming forward, what their expectations are. If you're in a particular area, you're going to be expected to underground the minimum amount and do a design for that to underground that. If you're in an area where we expect a bit lower development, or the undergrounding needs are not as critical, then there's another approach for you there. So it's really highlighting all of the different options so that we do have clear guidelines and we do avoid situations that we're currently seeing on 2nd Avenue.
Yeah, thank you. I think as I read through this particular section, because it was of interest, I understand why BC Hydro and the electrical piece gets so much. There's a lot of complexity there and so on, but the other utilities seem to get a much lighter treatment, yet they're the ones that I'm seeing that we haven't had success with achieving. And I just wonder where that guidance sits on those other utilities, not the electrical, but the communication stuff.
Certainly. So we did include, and it should have been included in here, but I believe by using the title electrical utilities, we're referring to all of the types of shallow utilities. That's not just BC Hydro. There are some BC Hydro technical details because they have technical requirements, but the guideline is intended to speak to all forms of above ground electrical utilities. Go ahead, Devin.
Sure, I'll just add as well. Thanks. So going back to the what and the how, our subdivision development control bylaw very explicitly says in the electrical section that all power lines and communications lines within a frontage shall be undergrounded. Doesn't tell you how to do that, and this starts moving into the how, which is very difficult. And I think 2nd Ave is a very good example of why, or a very good example of the complexity, because everyone moves at different paces. So we have multiple communications providers, and then we have BC Hydro, and BC Hydro has different voltages and whatnot. All of that can play a role in how fast and how complex the design is. So for 2nd Ave, I would say just wait. It's coming, but it's not. They don't all come down at the same time because of multiple different parties all having their own schedules and their own delays. So.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think I don't have a specific edit in that area, but as I read through just undergrounding utilities, it sort of jumped, is this hydro only? Is it this other bit? And I think that that I may not be the only one, but it's obviously not a deal breaker. I'll go to Councillor Hamilton in and around this. I'll go to Councillor.
Yeah, sorry, this is just specifically on this distraction, which is not about the guidelines, but Second Avenue between Victoria and Winnipeg, the remaining overhead, I assume telecommunications line, is that going to be undergrounded at some point, or is that going to remain above ground for the foreseeable? Like, is there a plan to underground it without ripping up the sidewalk, obviously?
So through the mayor, as Devin noted, our subdivision development control bylaw does state undergrounding, and these guidelines explain how. And this guideline also highlights that Second Avenue is a critical area where we're going to want to see undergrounding. And so the plan will be, as these lots are developing, that this Second Avenue will be undergrounded.
I think maybe I wasn't clear enough on my question. The two buildings that are just completing do not have undergrounded telecommunications lines in front of them. Are they required to underground those telecommunication lines, or will they remain above ground?
Through the mayor, we're getting into the details of a servicing agreement that we have a long history on, but I can say yes, they will eventually be undergrounded. We do have, as part of those developments, they installed conduit, so they're ready to go. Once again, we're just waiting on that to happen.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you for indulging. This was a bit of a discussion point as we were walking for some food earlier. I go to relevant. Councillor Benningham.
Yeah, I want to sort of pick up on the bike lane or bike routing topic, and I think there's a piece of this that maybe does belong here. And I appreciate seeing the full context, because it really sort of opened my eyes to some stuff and made me think about some things. And there's, I suspect, another piece that maybe belongs in other policies. So I'll just try and dive in a little bit. But if Third and Loggers are meant to be our primary bike routes, I would wonder why there's not guidance to suggest, a lot of the bike parking should be focused on Third and Loggers, with the thought that since Cleveland Second aren't the biking streets, you sort of park and get off, and then you're sort of walking on the more pedestrian areas, and therefore you would need or expect less bike parking in the street design. Maybe not none, but probably less. And so is there a reason why we wouldn't sort of speak to that in the guidelines?
Through the mayor, the guidelines do speak to a particular guideline around kind of our corner plazas, and when those corner plazas intersect with bike lanes, that those are really great opportunities for, covered bike shelters or kind of expanded bicycle infrastructure needs. From my understanding of active transportation needs, someone might get off a bike lane, walk down a sidewalk, want to park their bike and get into a store. And so I don't believe that there's a desire to reduce bike lane opportunities on all of our streetscapes and just focus them on particular bike lane routes. But there is guidelines in here that speak to putting bike racks, thank you, on all of our streets downtown to accommodate those needs.
Okay, I'll ponder that a bit. And I guess this brings me to my other sort of thought or sort of thoughts on 2.10.5. It talks about bike lane snow clearing, which sort of, it says we're not going to prioritize. And I'm trying to wrap my head around it, because there's a near term versus a future time when we have bike lanes on Third and Loggers, which seems like it could be a ways away. But we're not prioritizing snow removal on those lanes. Yet we've just heard that we didn't need, and we pulled a lane clearing machine out of our budget, which seems to be at odds in my mind with the idea that we don't have capacity to clear the lanes, because, we pulled the machine to do it, I think. And then that really, during a snow event, then if we're not clearing the lanes, you're on Third or on Loggers with transit, with the garbage trucks, with the trucks. And so it really seems to disincentivize the mode shift, which we have decided we aggressively need to pursue. And so I guess, there's a part of me, as I read through this, I really think maybe we need to think about one way on on Cleveland and Second with a bike lane and make, bike lane pedestrian is the priority on where all the commercial activity is. And it's the vehicles that are on Third and Loggers, which is a bit of a rethink of a few things. I grant you that. But when I sort of see this collectively, it sort of doesn't make a lot of, it's not super appealing as a cyclist, which is one of the modes we're really trying to drive towards. And so whether we adjust our snow clearing priority, where we put the bike parking, if we're really trying to keep the bikes onto Third and making it as easy as possible. And some of these things, like, I feel like some of these parts aren't quite aligned yet. And I don't know that this belongs in the guidance or these guidelines, but how do we, and maybe it's a question to the mayor, like, where do we have that conversation about how we work through some of these things?
I'm gonna first just see if staff wants to chime in on that, and then I'll take the bait and answer, give my perspective on it.
Through the mail, I'll take a quick stab at this. Our maps are all based on the active transportation plan and the OCP plan. So to change the direction of that, I would recommend that those plans should be brought back for discussion. And I don't believe they're kind of in any future budget plans and things like that to review. So I just want to highlight that consideration. I also want to highlight that the bike lanes are actually strategically located on a lot of our collector routes, and so to create kind of a bike through feel, and to provide ease and convenience to cyclists, the same way we would to support movement of vehicles through the space as well. And then in terms of the snow clearing component, I just want to clarify that it's not that we wouldn't snow clear bike lanes, it's just that it's not the priority route. So I believe it says in here that, we would get to them in snow events, and that there's are alternatives in the interim where we still will have transit routes that are being cleared, and that our roads tend to, downtown, when sidewalks or bike lanes are not cleared, are kind of a WUNRFed shared space anyways in these immediate snow events. So it's just to highlight that it's not kind of in our work plan to prioritize them right now. And if that is something council wanted to explore, that would be something that would have to be explored through kind of like public work operation budgets and priorities.
I think when I think about how we run these bike paths, the priority clearing for bike paths is happening. That's not the same machine that's clearing for the transit route, and that's the corridor trail and those bigger connector pieces. So just like any of our facilities, we would need to figure out how to prioritize the clearing of the bike lanes with the machines that we have available. So I think that you raise an excellent point, but this is about the how of executing all of our other policies. I do think it is an interesting read to understand how all these things come together, which we should be considering all the time. I know that we all strive to, but when we set out to do something like this, we really need to untangle those pieces where there's a maybe conflict or misalignment, and we can take the learnings from this. And I think it's going to be on us to understand if we would like other outcomes here, the direction lives likely elsewhere. Maybe not exclusively, maybe there is something that we can adjust in this, but largely lives elsewhere. Mr. Valniskas?
Thank you. Just wanted to more generally add that it's such a big body of work in here, amalgamating all of the policies, that it's probably going to be to some extent outdated the minute council endorses this document. And that's just the nature of most of the work that we do, especially at this large scale. So just would caution council from trying to fix too many things. The other aspect is we don't have any more budget for this project or staff time. So if council wanted more changes here, that would require staff going back, we'd probably have to look at reprioritizing something else.
Just as a process question, when we get this over the line, and you said it is a huge piece of work, but we've had some learning through this where we'd like to see XYZ thing change and we go adjust that policy. Is this the kind of thing that if, say, it was active transportation update, just to use the current topic, it could be any number of the discussion points today. Would we need to be conscious of the need to update this document when we're budgeting for that project? So implementation of, like, if we make changes to the, I don't know what, transit routing through downtown or the active transportation plan or any number of those things that fed into this, would going forward, would updating this document be part of that project? And would you consider it that way just to make sure that that gets implemented? Like, I'm just trying to think how we do this going forward. I think this is a great piece of work, but like you say, it's a little disheartening to hear that's outdated today, but I understand but I understand the context of that. And as work continues, how are we ensuring that this gets sort of updated from time to time, given that it is such a big, complex piece of work?
Yeah, so any amendments to the maps and those details, if they're minor or if they're there's some guideline comments that were made today, those are easily amendable. What's not so easily amendable is the streetscape what's the term? Streetscape standards section. And that's where we've got those really technical cross sections for every single street. And I'll just highlight again that there's, this has come originally from the 2005 plans, and they've gone through the OCP, and they've gone through a lot of different reviews over the last 20 years. And we do have kind of a limited space in our downtown, and I don't know if I foresee major shifts in that, but it certainly is to council's discretion to kind of review that active transportation plan or make those changes. And I do believe it's a great comment from the mayor to ensure that when you are making those changes, that this would have to impact some more budget to redesign those streets.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pennegault?
Yeah, so start with the question. So item 2 in the recommendation that we endorse the public realm and streetscape design guidelines, which implies to me that this is our guidelines, but I've also heard that no, actually staff is going to be maintaining this and have the discretion to enforce it and so on. So can you just clarify who has sort of authority or ownership over these guidelines? Like, are we just sort of providing some feedback, but this is really staff's stuff, or is this council's sort of guidelines to determine?
So through the mayor, I believe that the council policy documents are kind of this, are where council can provide that what and why direction. And this document is really the how details components. And that's why it is a staff amended and staff directed to make changes to it. It's similar to the streetscape lighting design criteria that was endorsed by council. We do bring it forward for council approval. We did ask for bylaw amendments to the subdivision development control bylaw to reference it. However, it is a staff managed document, and quite recently we just made an amendment. It's now a 2025 document because the fixture got outdated. And so we had to go out and do an RFI again and find a new fixture. We fixed some edits and some issues in the document, but it's really a technical document for staff to apply the how of your policy direction. And so any future bigger policy documents that are amended can certainly be considered to what amendments need to be done to this how document as a result of that. But we seek that direction through those policy documents, maybe not through this document, if that's clear.
Yeah, you follow up, but I would like to I've given this lots of space because it pulls tons of things together. But again, we've heard this is the how, not the what. And if we have work to do on some of these outcomes, then we need to do it in the appropriate spot. So I'd like to get to the recommendation portion if everyone's okay with that. So do we have, is anyone prepared to make this, move the staff recommendation or propose an alternate? Councillor French, you're moving the staff recommendation on all 3 pieces here. Yeah. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hamilton seconds. Would you speak to it?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Herford. I really see this as set of staff documents, and I'm thankful that you've brought it to us for us to review, to give feedback on, and comment on, and I don't need to have any more control than that over the document, because for me, it's very operational. It's not 30,000 feet. It is on the ground. So I think that this set of staff recommendations here is appropriate. I think the documentation is great. And just reflecting on Mr. Valeniska's thought of it being outdated the minute we give it approval, that is the reality of a lot of the work that comes out of our staff. And there's not really a heck of a lot that we can do about that, other than have faith that staff is keeping an eye on the document as it ages and ensuring that it's kept up to date appropriately. Thanks.
Thank you. Go to the seconder.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this forward. I think that the general idea, the general concept of amalgamating all of the different bylaws and small design things that a developer is going to need to look at to make their plan makes absolute sense. I can absolutely see why this project would take a long time to get together. There are a lot of details in here. And just to add another one, the tactile pads that we have, when our snowplow goes over them, it knocks the little nibs off of them.
We fixed that in the guideline.
In the guide, the brand new sidewalk on Perth, all the nibs. Anyways, thank you very much for all your work on this.
Thank you, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. I will also support this. It wasn't clear to me when I went through it that these were not council-owned guidelines. So that's good clarification. It does feel a bit weird to actually endorse things that we are not sort of the authorities over. So I did find this really useful in, as much as I try and consider all the things, seeing it all sort of tied together, and this is the end result, and here are pictures of it, was very helpful. And I think, to me, and I guess take my feedback as highlights of implying areas where I think we need some maybe policy discussion. I think for me, the whole, I don't think we've got it sorted in terms of bike access to downtown and the mode shift we want, and the snow clearing, and I think there's some stuff to work out there. And if we need to do that in policy, so be it. But for me, that feels like, having read through this and really putting all the pieces together, this was really helpful for, I think we've got a bit of misalignment there. But this, as proposed, is supportable. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Stoner, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I will support the motion on the floor, and thanks again to staff for all the work in pulling this together. I do think it's a really helpful document in a lot of ways, and agree that it is technical in nature, and so trying to figure out what value we can add is an interesting one. I think, just like a process perspective, this probably would have been helpful to come to council like a month ago at committee of the whole for some more fulsome discussion, just because I think that there's even though it will be outdated the minute we approve it, simple things like adding a few definitions here or there. I'm not going to hold it up tonight, but we don't have definitions for the road classifications in there. And so you'd have to reference another document in order to understand what's a minor or major collector road. So just from like a readability, usability, as well as a little bit of external engagement with some of the folks like the downtown BIA, who I think would be impacted by some of the technical details in here, would have been helpful to me. But I think that this is well thought out. It collects a number of different areas where we have existing policy or overlapping policy and tries to clarify those. And I agree with Councillor Pettingill that maybe it raises a few policy questions for me. I also had in my notes whether we should consider whether Cleveland and 2nd Ave should be alternating one ways. But that is not a discussion for tonight. That is a discussion for another document. But yeah, so thanks to staff for the work, and happy to support.
Thank you. Any other comments? Speaking support of the motion, I think this was well, it's a huge piece of work, and it was interesting to sort of be able to pause and reflect on all of the policies that pour into accomplishing something. In this case, in our downtown core, and likely how the complexity elsewhere in the community as well. So, I think so I think this document provides the clarity that's needed. I do think that I'm also happy to hear that part of this wasn't staff coming to council with look what we discovered as we set out to do this. We've got this major conflict that you need to change policy one way or the other to do that. So I'm happy that there was a path through this, and I'm glad it's triggered a lot of thought and conversation amongst myself and council that we'll take into the next pieces that will likely feed into this in future. So thank you for all the work on this, and some truly visionary pieces there, like just really being able to sort of think about what these streets can and will look like over time is pretty special. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Council, next we've got some adoptions. So as per usual, we don't receive a presentation of any sort. So these are the final touches on these pieces. So first up, we have the 5-year financial plan, the spring amendment. Would someone like to move that? Councillor French moves that. I'll second it. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So next is the District of Squamish property tax rate bylaw adoption. Are you moving? Councillor Hamilton adopts. Thank you. Councillor French seconds. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. We have, thank you for that. We have no staff reports, no late agenda items. We had no correspondence action requested. We did not have any items referred from the consent agenda, nor business arising from the minutes. Notice of motion from council, seeing none. Open question periods. If anyone in the audience has a question of clarity on what happened here this evening, no one is stepping up for that. Council or staff announcements. Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. A lot has happened in the last couple of weeks. We had a 5th Tuesday in the month of April, so there's been a lot of Tuesdays. I'm going to start with Sunday at Brennan Park. It was super busy. Soccer games, hockey camps, Squamish Youth Triathlon was held in the morning, and I had the honor of being the finish line announcer for that event, as something that I've done for many, many years. And for those who aren't familiar with it, it is a youth competition for kids from age 14 down to the tiny tri competitors who are 3 and 4 years of age. So think about this: 3 years old, swimming in the pool, and then getting onto a bike, and then doing a run. And at 3 years old, some of these kids are already accomplished athletes. Welcome to Squamish. And then in the afternoon on Sunday, I had the honor to throw the ceremonial first pitch of the Howe Sound minor ball season at Leroy Watt Field. So just Sunday in particular was super busy at Brennan Park, and a generally busy weekend. I also want to note that I attended the Lower Mainland Local Government Association annual meeting in Whistler last week. I suspect some of you may touch on that in coming up. And I also wanted to note that I attended the Day of Mourning event a couple of Sundays ago that was held downtown. I'm hoping Mayor Herford will have an update on that in a minute. And I will wrap up by thanking Councillor Greenlaw for participating in democracy at the federal level by representing the Green Party in the federal election, and congratulating Patrick Weiler for being re-elected as our Member of Parliament for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Okay, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, a few things to add. As some folks may notice, I'm sporting a new hairstyle. I guess my spring/summer hairstyle. There was a Balding for Dollars event, which raises funds for children's cancer at BC Children's Hospital. It was in Whistler, but there's a number of Squamish folks there supporting the cause, and so that was a great sort of sea to sky event. Same day as the day of mourning, which I attended, there was was the last day of the book crawl, which was really cool to see. You know, all the books you can get downtown. Just these sort of a lot of these little events popping up, which are just, if you get an opportunity to jump on any of them, please do, because you see all kinds of really cool little spots in our community. Our Squamish held a tour from Rose Park down to the Oceanfront and back to ice cream at Narwhals. I missed the ice cream part, but the rest of the tour was fantastic, and some great conversation, and sort of seeing the community from other people's perspective, and hearing that sort of as a counselor, what everyone's saying about what's going on was really, really interesting. The Fire Smart, the fire department at the Garibaldi Estates, I guess Fire Hall number 2, giant bouncy castle, and seemed to be a really fun event for everyone. I got there towards the end, but still lots of kids laughing and having fun. And I do want to pick up on the Lower Mainland Local Government Association piece, just to clarify that our membership represents about 75% or 70%-ish of the province's population, and this is where we get together as local governments to decide what we want to advocate to the province for. So we go to the Union of BC Municipalities, which is sort of the provincial version of this. I heard a few people mention that, hey, all the resolutions are from Port Moody, New Westminster, and Squamish. And so our community is very active in telling the province what our community needs. And we're sort of on I would say, another level compared to a lot of communities. So we have great representation. Mayor Herford and myself are actually on the board of this, and Councillor Stoner is on the UBCM board, sort of doing the similar thing at the provincial level. So I just want to, I know we talk about these acronyms. I'm not sure people really ever know what we're talking about, but we are, as a community, punching well above our weight at the province in terms of what we need. We don't always get what we want, but we are there fighting the good fight a lot, and doing comparatively quite well. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other updates? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, thanks. I have also had a busy past few weeks. As Councillor French indicated, I survived a federal campaign and election and the aftermath of it. And if any of you ever need H-frames ever again in your life, please come to my house. I have a million of them. Over the last weekend, I attended the Valley Cliff Elementary Carnival, which was fantastic and super well attended. And then on Saturday, we participated in the hatchery fry release at Judd Beach with, I think it was the Streamkeepers doing that. It was awesome. Super interesting and really interactive. And then we also did you can tell what demographic I represent here, but we also did the Waldorf Mayfair, which is always a super lovely event. If you've never attended it, it's really charming and fun. And then on Sunday, we went to Buddy and Friends at the Railway Museum, which was also super fun with local artists, and just good times. Really nice events.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thanks. In addition to all that, it has been a busy time. 2 weeks past was the Squamish Regional District meetings. And I try and remember back and bring back things that are probably of relevance to this council and community. We got an update from the Wildlife Connectivity Project, and they've been doing really fantastic work and are moving kind of into the implementation phase. after doing some really detailed GIS analysis work. And just so folks are aware, there's an additional $40,000 that we are giving to that project through what we call payment in lieu of taxes from the Southern Pilt Fund. So that's a shared fund from the Area D and the District of Squamish. So there's some further funding there for that work, which is really great. And then that week was followed on by a really great gathering for the How Sound Community Forum, which many folks were at. Mayor Herford and Councillor Pettingill and Councillor Greenlaw were all there. Just a really great opportunity to connect with other locally electeds from around How Sound, as well as staff on trying to advance some of the components of the biosphere. And it's always great to be connected into that space. And we were able to host them here in Squamish, down at the Oceanfront Presentation Center, which was really a lovely space to hold a meeting. Also want to do a shout out to the Cheakamus Center, who had their annual open house this past weekend, which is always one of my favorite events, and was super well attended by many in the community. So thanks so much to opening up that beautiful space for more people to be able to enjoy it. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, have you been up to something in the last little bit?
I have, in fact. I just returned from London, England last night. And it wasn't exactly a vacation. I was at work too. I attended a free public lecture at Gresham College on the subject of local government finance in Britain. Gresham College has been hosting free public lectures since the year 1597 on all kinds of interesting topics. The specific title was "Why Are Cities Going Bankrupt in the United Kingdom?" And the latest example is the city of Birmingham, but been several over the last few years. And the story is of interest to us right across Canada because we have the same trends. Offloading from central government to local government. Decline in transfer payments from central government to local governments. And also a decline in the grant programs available from central governments to local government. And although some of the responsibilities we have are different, there's a lot of shared issues like more and more housing and social programs and healthcare programs devolving to local government. And the solutions are seen to be tax reform and reform to revenue streams available to local government. And these are all trends here in Canada. And I think it was illuminating to me that there's these trends elsewhere and looking at perhaps solutions elsewhere as well, that some of my colleagues, Councillor Pettingill, Mayor Herford, Councillor Stoner, involved in some of these organizations representing us, they're of interest to us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Anderson, you often cite historic pieces, and I have a note here about a 1999 parking study, but I think referencing 1597 is a new record for us. But thank you for that. I'd love to catch up on your learnings there. That sounds really interesting. Any other updates before I go into mine here? It has been a little while since we've had opportunity to do this this update, the way the schedule's worked out. So I'm going to go back to April 24th, which was I attended an event at the Bag that I wanted to mention. It was called the Your Closet Catwalk Fashion Show. And the models, it was a fashion show, but all the models brought their own clothes from home, and they wrote the nice bio about, this is a shirt that I got thrifted from wherever, and these were a gift, and the shoes were, and so on. And it was amazing because it was celebrating thrifting. It was a circular economy event, but it was never said out loud. This is when the creative folks get a hold of a concept. It was incredible. So there was first round, like I said, the models all brought their own clothes, and like any fashion show, there was a walk and a talk about what they were wearing, and then there was a workshop session in between with local people involved in sustainable clothing practices, whether that's curated thrifting or actually repurposing clothes and so on. And then there was the last walk was all the models in clothes from these people that have been working in this space, and is really I wanted to recognize the art community, the creatives for folks for really advancing the work on that we know is so important here around circular economy, and doing it in just such a incredible and fashionable way. So it was great, a great evening at the Bracknell Art Gallery. Then on April 25th, we heard a little bit, some other comments around, we were hosting the Howe Sound Community Forum, which hosted, we had 64 elected officials, staff, and observers gathered here, and it was great. I find these forums through my time as an elected official to be one of my favorite events, where we get together and share what's happening in our community and learn what's happening in other communities. The host community gets to choose sort of what the topics are going to be presented on, besides the roundtable, where all the communities get to speak about what they're working on in their community. So I was proud to bring forward a presentation on the two presentations that really I think highlight the good work that we're doing with the Squamish Nation. David Ralston, who our senior manager infrastructure and planning here, presented on the Chikai debris flow barrier that's under construction, and we had Sarah Weber from the professional working on the community forest present on that initiative. These are two initiatives that have taken some level of cooperation and working together with between the district and the nation. So it was a great day. Thank you for everybody here that was able to attend. And part of the tour was also part of the day did involve walking around our new park, and it's pretty interesting to watch people from other communities just walking around with their jaw on the floor. It was a great day out. And there is some coverage on the Howe Sound Biosphere is the organizing body for this, and they have a little article up if anyone's interested in finding out some more about what happened at this one or what these are all about in general. The 27th was the I pull it up, the 28th was the day of the day of mourning every year is the 28th. We celebrate on the 27th, just the way that it worked out. So, and what this is every year, workers, families, employers, and others come together at events held around the province to remember those who have lost their lives on the job, and to renew our commitment to creating safer workplaces. So we had union representatives, we had representatives from the province there as well. For those that don't know, there is a memorial to people that have passed in the workplace over in Pavilion Park, and I would suggest stopping by sometime and having a read of the names. I know I have memories of far too many names on that list, and I'm sure others in the community do as well. So it was great to spend some time with the community and to sort of contemplate what we can do to ensure that list doesn't get any longer. On the 28th, a bit of a sneak peek into the House of Lager, which is the first business operating down on the Oceanfront. They were doing their soft opening, and that has continued as well. So it was after being there for the Biosphere event, and we were upstairs and we weren't involved in that space. It was great to get into that space and see what they have going on there. I'm sure everyone will get become familiar with that space too, but it's quite something to see the first business really arrive at the Oceanfront outside of or customer facing business, I guess, arrive there. So pretty exciting, and I think the start of good things to come. And then of course we were the Lower Mainland Local Government Association conference, the 29th to the 1st. It was in Whistler, although I didn't leave the building for a day and a half, I think, at one point, but it was great to get, and similar to earlier where I was speaking about the Biosphere Roundtable and just everyone having an opportunity to get together and share what's happening in their community. These conferences, just getting together with other elected officials from around the Lower Mainland, talking about what's important to them, how they go about their work. I'm on the board with Councillor Pettingill as well, although he's the in line for the presidency's third vice president, and I was lucky enough to host a panel with around leadership in crisis with the fire chief from West Kelowna, who's obviously he was there and on the front lines during the major fire that they had there. Mayor O'Connell from Lytton, who, seeing her town burn to the ground, decided to step forward and do something about it. She's been leading the recovery in Lytton, and just now has moved into a new house. I think it was 2 weeks ago, I think, that she moved into her newly rebuilt home. I think it's the third one in the community. So, as well as Kirby Brown from Sea to Sky Gondola, who led the gondola through their 2 acts of sabotage in the midst of the COVID as well. And it was great. I enjoyed that conversation. But what really struck me was what had just happened was some of our colleagues from Vancouver were at the Lapu Lapu Festival, and their next stop was this conference. And they stood up and shared as part of this leadership in crisis as they were in the midst of theirs. And it was quite, quite moving. We also had the resolution sessions, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for their work in the resolution sessions. Everyone, all of the resolutions that we passed here as a council made it through the resolutions process at the LMLGA. So we'll be able to champion these going forward at UBCM, which is quite exciting. And we do have a very engaged council here that we really are striving for change. And I really appreciate all the work on those resolutions in advance to get them supportable around this table. And that work led to them being supported through the LMLGA resolution process. Also from there, on Saturday, I'm also sit on the House Sound Roundtable, which is in support of it's a Biosphere Region initiative. So again, got to spend some time with folks working on biosphere-related activities around House Sound at Furry Creek. And it was great to hear just all the different initiatives and areas of expertise and interest from the group. That was Saturday, and on Sunday had a big youth council event at the Bracknell Art Gallery. It was the big event of the year for this cohort of youth council. They decided to kind of do 3 things all at once, which isn't always which can be daunting, but they really stepped up and nailed it, in my opinion. They had a makers market for youth, so to support youth entrepreneurs. They celebrated youth in the community through Youth Excellence Awards, and some of those awards actually also recognize the adults that were providing exceptional support. So Teacher of the Year, Coach of the Year, this type of thing, as well as a granting program for some small grants to support initiatives that they felt were important. And tying back to the House Sound Roundtable, the House Sound Roundtable reached out and asked me if there was a youth that I could recommend or how they could get a youth representative here. And I was able to go to the youth council and find someone that was interested, and that person participated in the roundtable on the Saturday and was ecstatic to do so. So really interesting to see the reach of youth council through through their various initiatives and through their individual capacity they bring. So it has been and that was the short list. It has been an extremely busy time. And I also wanted to mention that tonight while we were here doing our work, there was a Lapu Lapu memorial mass happening and at the Catholic Church. Obviously I think we would all like to be with the Filipino community as they deal with this, and I know there'll be other opportunities too. But my condolences to everyone there, and I hope that event went well this evening. That's going to conclude my update, Councillor Hamilton. Yep.
Sorry, there's still one more agenda item.
That concludes my update. Thank you. I think I know where you're taking us. You're giving me the wrap it up signal there too a little bit. Sorry, mine was long. We do not have a motion to close. We do not have any council staff and camera announcements. So now I will looking for a thank you, Councillor Stoner. Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Motion. That's a motion to terminate, and we are all in favor of that. Thank you so much for your work tonight, everybody. And to the audience for sticking around. And we'll see you back next week.
Thanks for recognizing my double hands.